Jay Berwanger, 1935. The Heisman Trophy, originally called the Downtown Athletic Club Trophy, was first awarded in 1935, and its inaugural winner was Jay Berwanger of the University of Chicago. A do-it-all halfback in the single-wing era, Berwanger was the ultimate Iron Man. He not only ran the ball, but he also passed, punted, tackled, and even handled kicking duties. That season, Berwanger's versatility made him one of the most feared players in the country. He rushed for over 400 yards, passed for nearly 500 more, and was just as valuable on defense, often playing the full 60 minutes. Sports writers nicknamed him the one-man gang, a testament to his dominance on both sides of the ball. Berwanger's Heisman win came at a time when college football was still growing into the national spectacle it would later become, but his impact was undeniable. In 1936, he became the very first player selected in the inaugural NFL draft, taken by the Philadelphia Eagles. However, he never played professional football, citing the league's low salaries, and instead pursuing a career in business. Larry Kelly, 1936. The second Heisman Trophy went to Yale's Larry Kelly, a standout end who was as polished a receiver as he was a defensive player. At a time when passing was still limited, Kelly's ability to catch the ball set him apart in college football's run-heavy era. In 1936, Kelly was the star of a Yale team that finished 7-1. He hauled in game-changing passes, played solid defense, and even contributed as a leader and captain on the field. While his season stats don't resemble modern Heisman numbers, he had just a handful of touchdown catches. Kelly's impact came in a time when completing even 8 to 10 passes in a game was rare, and his ability to stretch the field made Yale a national contender. What made Kelly's award significant was that he was the first recipient after the trophy officially took on the name Heisman Memorial Trophy, renamed to honor coach John Heisman, who had died that year. His win helped cement the trophy as more than a one-time award. It was becoming a symbol of college football excellence. Kelly turned down offers to play professional football, choosing instead to go into teaching and later working in publishing. Though his career on the field ended with college, his legacy lived on as the Heisman's first true receiving star, long before the modern passing game took over. Clint Frank, 1937. In 1937, Yale produced back-to-back Heisman winners, when halfback Clint Frank followed his teammate Larry Kelly in taking home the trophy. Frank was a versatile player who could run, pass, and kick, making him one of the most complete backs of his era. That season, Yale went 6-1, and Frank was the undisputed centerpiece of the offense. He rushed for around 800 yards, passed for over 500, and scored 11 touchdowns. In an era when most players played both ways, Frank was also a strong defensive presence and contributed as a punter. His ability to do everything on the field reflected the old-school model of football, where one star player often carried the entire load for a team. Frank's leadership was as important as his production. Serving as team captain, he guided Yale to a top 15 finish nationally and earned All-American honors. He became only the second player in history to win the Heisman while playing for an Ivy League school, reinforcing the dominance those programs once had before the sport's power shifted toward bigger state schools. After graduation, Frank declined opportunities to play professionally, instead pursuing a career in advertising and later serving as a World War II pilot. Davy O'Brien, 1938. The 1938 season belonged to Davy O'Brien, the small but fearless quarterback from TCU. Standing only 5 feet 7 inches and weighing around 150 pounds, O'Brien didn't fit the physical mold of a star, but his production made him a legend. That year, O'Brien led TCU to an undefeated 11-0 record and a Sugar Bowl victory over Carnegie Tech. He threw for 1,457 yards and 19 touchdowns, staggering numbers for the era, when most teams relied almost exclusively on the run. His passing yardage set a national record at the time, and he added another 400 rushing yards, showing he could do damage on the ground as well. What separated O'Brien from his peers was his dual role as both quarterback and defensive back. He played nearly every snap, leading one of the best defenses in the country, while also orchestrating the most dynamic offense. He even handled punting duties, highlighting how indispensable he was to the Horned Frogs. By season's end, O'Brien won the Heisman Trophy, the Maxwell Award, and was named an All-American. He was the first player from the Southwest Conference to win the Heisman, putting TCU on the national map in college football. O'Brien briefly played in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles, where he threw for over 1,700 yards as a rookie, but he retired after 2 seasons to join the FBI. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Nile Kinnick, 1939. Few Heisman seasons carry the weight and legacy of Nile Kinnick's in 1939. Playing for the Iowa Hawkeyes, Kinnick was more than the best player in the country. He was the heart of a program that became known as the Iron Men. That year, Iowa had only 33 players on its roster, forcing many starters to play both ways. Kinnick was the ultimate example of this. At halfback, he passed for 638 yards and 11 touchdowns, rushed for nearly 400 yards, and added place-kicking duties. On defense, he was as valuable, intercepting passes, making tackles, and even punting when needed. His Heisman moment came in Iowa's upset win over Notre Dame. In a tight defensive battle, Kinnick threw a 47-yard touchdown pass that proved to be the difference, securing a 7-6 victory that cemented his national reputation. By season's end, Kinnick had accounted for 107 of Iowa's 130 total points, a staggering level of production. He won the Heisman Trophy, Maxwell Award, Walter Camp Award, and was named the AP Athlete of the Year. In his Heisman acceptance speech, he humbly noted the looming conflict overseas, dedicating the honor to those on the battlefields of Europe and the Far East. Tragically, Kinnick's story didn't end on the football field. After law school, he enlisted as a Navy pilot during World War II. In 1943, he died in a training flight accident off the coast of Venezuela, becoming the only Heisman winner to lose his life in the war. Today, his legacy is immortalized. Iowa's stadium bears his name, Tom Harmon, 1940. When you think of early college football legends, Tom Harmon's 1940 season at Michigan stands near the top. Nicknamed Old 98, Harmon was the do-it-all star of the Wolverines, and his final year in Ann Arbor cemented him as one of the sport's iconic figures. Harmon's numbers jump off the page for the era. He rushed for 844 yards, passed for 506 more, and accounted for 23 total touchdowns. But those stats only tell part of the story. He was also Michigan's kicker, punter, and a stalwart on defense. In one game against Ohio State, Tom Harmon delivered one of the most famous individual performances in football history. 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, 4 extra points, and 3 interceptions on defense. Ohio Stadium gave him a standing ovation, a rare show of respect for a Michigan player in Columbus. That same season, Harmon's highlight reel included dazzling runs, long passes, and even special teams magic. Against Cal, he scored 4 touchdowns and returned an interception 90 yards. Unsurprisingly, Harmon swept the national awards, winning the Heisman Trophy, Maxwell Award, and AP Athlete of the Year. His Heisman campaign was one of dominance, not just in statistics, but in sheer influence on every Michigan win. After college, Harmon was the first overall pick in the 1941 NFL Draft, but like many players of the time, his career was interrupted by World War II. He served as a pilot, surviving multiple crashes before eventually returning home to a career in broadcasting. Bruce Smith, 1941. Before there were powerhouse programs dominating Heisman ballots every year, Bruce Smith from the University of Minnesota proved that a local hero could capture the nation's attention. Playing halfback for the Golden Gophers, Smith's 1941 season was the centerpiece of one of the strongest teams in college football history. One of his defining performances came against Michigan, a powerhouse in its own right. Smith guided the Gophers to a 7-0 victory in a brutal defensive struggle, making key plays on both sides of the ball. By the end of the year, Minnesota had outscored its opponents 186-38, with Smith responsible for much of that production. He was awarded the Heisman Trophy, making him the first player from Minnesota and the first from the Big Ten, outside of Chicago's Jay Berwanger, to win it. After college, Smith joined the Navy Air Corps during World War II, serving as a fighter pilot before eventually playing in the NFL. Injuries cut short his professional career, but in Minnesota, he remained an enduring symbol. His number 54 jersey was retired, and he's remembered as the ultimate gopher. Frank Sinkwich, 1942. The 1942 season turned Frank Sinkwich into a Georgia legend. Playing halfback for the Bulldogs, he was one of the first true dual-threat stars in college football, a player as dangerous throwing the ball as he was running it. Sinkwich's numbers were groundbreaking for the time. He passed for 1,456 yards and rushed for 795, totaling 30 touchdowns in an era when most offenses were still run-heavy and conservative. His playmaking ability lifted Georgia to an 11-1 record, capped by a Rose Bowl victory over UCLA. What made Sinkwich's season even more remarkable was his toughness. He played much of the year with a broken jaw, wearing a custom-made chin strap to keep it in place. Even with that injury, he was nearly unstoppable, and Georgia claimed a share of the national championship as recognized by several selectors, though Ohio State was the consensus champion. His highlight performances included a 4-touchdown showing against Cincinnati and a dominant game against Georgia Tech, where he threw for 230 yards and rushed for another 139. Week after week, Sinkwich carried the Bulldogs' offense and became the face of college football. At year's end, he won the Heisman Trophy, becoming the first player from the SEC to take home the award. He also earned the Maxwell Award and was unanimously recognized as an All-American. After college, Sinkwich went on to play in the NFL for the Detroit Lions, where he was named League MVP in 1944. Angelo Bertelli, 1943. Notre Dame has produced more Heisman winners than any other school, and Angelo Bertelli was the program's first. Playing quarterback under legendary coach Frank Leahy, Bertelli's 1943 season was short but spectacular, a perfect storm of talent, timing, and circumstance. Bertelli had already built a reputation as one of the most gifted passers of his era, mastering Leahy's T-formation offense. In not more than 6 games that season, he threw for 10 touchdowns and guided Notre Dame to a 6-0 record, earning the team the number 1 ranking in the country. But his story was defined by more than numbers. Midway through the season, Bertelli was called into active duty as a Marine Corps officer, shipping out before the season ended. Despite missing nearly half the year, his impact was so great that he still won the Heisman Trophy by a wide margin. Notre Dame went on to finish 9-1 without him, claiming the national championship. But Bertelli's early season dominance had already cemented his legacy. He became the first player to show that a shortened but brilliant season could still outweigh longer resumes when it came to the Heisman vote. After the war, Bertelli briefly played pro football in the AAFC, but his name remains most closely tied to Notre Dame history. Les Horvath, 1944. Ohio State's first Heisman winner came during one of the most unusual chapters in college football history. Les Horvath had actually graduated in 1942 and was in dental school when World War II created roster shortages. With players scattered in military service, the NCAA granted him another year of eligibility, and he returned to the Buckeyes in 1944 for one final season. Horvath made the most of his unexpected encore. Playing halfback in Ohio State's single-wing offense, he rushed for 924 yards and accounted for 12 total touchdowns, leading the Buckeyes to a perfect 9-0 record and a Big Ten championship. One of his signature games came against Iowa, where he scored 3 touchdowns and piled up more than 200 yards of offense. By year's end, Horvath was awarded the Heisman Trophy, becoming the first Buckeye to ever win. His story stood out not only for his performance on the field, but for the circumstances around it. He was essentially a graduate student athlete, balancing coursework in dental school with one of the most successful football seasons in program history. Horvath never pursued a professional football career, choosing instead to finish his medical training and become a practicing dentist. Doc Blanchard, 1945. Army football in the mid-1940s was a powerhouse, and at the center of it all was Felix Doc Blanchard. In 1945, he became the first junior to win the Heisman Trophy, earning the nickname Mr. Inside, as part of Army's legendary backfield alongside Glenn Davis, Mr. Outside. Blanchard's style was all about power. At 6 feet 0 inches and 210 pounds, he was a bruising fullback who ran straight through defenses. Beyond his ground production, he was also a reliable defensive player and even handled kicking duties. Army went 9-0 in 1945, outscoring opponents by a staggering 412-46 margin. Their dominance was highlighted by blowout wins over traditional powers like Notre Dame and Penn. Blanchard's Heisman win symbolized not only his individual dominance, but also the height of Army's football dynasty during World War II. The Black Knights would win 3 straight national championships from 1944 to 1946, with Blanchard as the centerpiece of the first 2. After college, Blanchard's path took a different turn. He was drafted by the NFL, but chose a career in the military instead, serving as an Air Force pilot for more than 25 years. Glenn Davis, 1946. If Doc Blanchard was Army's Mr. Inside, then Glenn Davis was Mr. Outside. In 1946, Davis capped one of the most remarkable careers in college football history by winning the Heisman Trophy. Known for his blazing speed and big playability, Davis was the perfect complement to Blanchard's power, and together they formed an unstoppable backfield that dominated the mid-1940s. That year, Davis rushed for 712 yards on 123 carries, an astonishing 5.8 yards per attempt, and added 396 receiving yards with 13 total touchdowns. But statistics only hint at his impact. Nearly every time he touched the ball, he had a chance to score. In fact, over his career, Davis averaged a touchdown once every 9 touches, a rate that still stands among the best in college football history. Army went 9-1 in 1946, with the lone blemish being a 0-0 tie against Notre Dame in what was billed as the game of the century. Even in that defensive stalemate, Davis's presence loomed large, forcing Notre Dame to account for him on every snap. By the end of the season, Davis was not only the Heisman winner, but also a 3-time unanimous All-American, a Maxwell Award recipient, and widely regarded as one of the most electrifying players the game had ever seen. After graduation, Davis was drafted by the Los Angeles Rams, where he played 2 seasons before injuries shortened his career. His college legacy, however, was secure. Johnny Lujack, 1947. Notre Dame had already built a reputation as the nation's powerhouse under legendary coach Frank Leahy, but in 1947, the Fighting Irish were unstoppable, thanks in large part to their star quarterback, Johnny Lujack. He had been a key contributor in previous seasons, but 1947 was the year he emerged as the face of college football and captured the Heisman Trophy. Lujack wasn't a quarterback in the modern sense. He was a true all-around player. He passed for 777 yards and 9 touchdowns that season, numbers that might seem modest today, but were impressive in a run-heavy era. But his contributions didn't stop there. Lujack was also a hard-hitting defensive back and even handled punting duties. The Heisman Trophy made him Notre Dame's second winner, following Angelo Bertelli in 1943. After college, Lujack went on to play for the Chicago Bears, where he continued to display his multidimensional skill set, even setting an NFL record with 6 touchdown passes in one game in 1949. Doak Walker, 1948. Southern Methodist University had never seen a player quite like Doak Walker, and few programs ever would. By the time he won the Heisman Trophy in 1948, Walker was already a household name in college football, a rare blend of speed, agility, toughness, and charisma. Walker was a true triple threat. He rushed for 532 yards, passed for 304 more, and added 342 yards on receptions in 1948. He scored 11 touchdowns, but his value went far beyond numbers. He was also the team's kicker, return specialist, and defensive back, handling nearly every role with equal brilliance. That season, Walker led SMU to a 9-1 record and a share of the Southwest Conference title. His performance in tight games, especially a 19-12 victory over Texas, Walker underscored his reputation as a clutch performer. Fans packed the Cotton Bowl in Dallas to see him play, and he became so popular that SMU's attendance doubled during his career. The Heisman capped what was already an extraordinary run. Walker had been a two-time All-American before 1948 and would be one again in 1949. His influence was so immense that the Downtown Athletic Club rushed to give him the award. After college, Walker went on to star for the Detroit Lions, helping them win 2 NFL championships in the 1950s. His legacy is so enduring that the Doak Walker Award, given annually to the nation's top running back, was named in his honor. Leon Hart, 1949. Notre Dame ended the 1940s on top of the college football world, and their star that year was Leon Hart. He was huge for his time, and that didn't limit him. He could do it all. Hart played both offense and defense, and he was so good that he became the last lineman ever to win the Heisman Trophy. In 1949, he caught 19 passes for 257 yards and scored 5 touchdowns. That may not sound like much today, but in those days, teams didn't throw the ball very often. Beyond the stats, Hart was the player who set the tone. On offense, he was a powerful blocker who made space for the running backs. On defense, he chased down quarterbacks and stopped runners in their tracks. Notre Dame went 10-0 that season and claimed another national championship under coach Frank Leahy. The team outscored opponents 360-86, and Hart, as team captain, was the leader who kept everything steady. He was named an All-American and was clearly the best all-around player in the country. Winning the Heisman put Hart in rare company. He joined Angelo Bertelli and Johnny Lujack as Notre Dame's Heisman winners of the decade, showing really how dominant the Irish were in the 1940s. After college, Hart went on to play for the Detroit Lions, where he won 3 NFL championships in the 1950s. His Heisman win stands out in history because it proved a lineman could be the most valuable player in the game. Vic Janowicz, 1950. In 1950, Ohio State had a player who could do it all, and his name was Vic Janowicz. He played halfback, but he was much more than that. He ran the ball, threw passes, kicked field goals, handled punts, and even played defense. He was the kind of player coaches dream about because he could fill almost any role. That season, Janowicz scored 16 touchdowns, kicked 17 extra points, and added 2 field goals, giving him 135 total points, the most in the nation. He was the heart of the Buckeyes offense, and he had a knack for making big plays. One moment he was breaking off a long run. The next, he was throwing a touchdown or flipping the field with a strong punt. Ohio State finished with a 6-3 record under coach Wes Fessler. The team wasn't perfect, but Janowicz stood out so much that he was named an All-American and became Ohio State's second Heisman winner, following Les Horvath in 1944. After college, Janowicz tried professional baseball with the Pittsburgh Pirates before switching to football with Washington in the NFL. Sadly, a car accident cut his career short, but his Heisman year is still remembered as one of the most versatile seasons ever. Billy Vessels, 1952. The early 1950s belonged to Oklahoma football, and in 1952, their biggest star was Billy Vessels. He was fast, tough, and the perfect fit for Coach Bud Wilkinson's powerful offense. That season, Vessels rushed for over 1,000 yards and scored 17 touchdowns. He was explosive as a runner, often breaking big plays that completely changed games. He wasn't piling up stats against weak teams either. His biggest performances came in tough matchups that kept Oklahoma near the top of the rankings all year. The Sooners finished 8-1-1, and Vessels was the clear leader. He had the speed to outrun defenses and the strength to fight for extra yards when the team needed them most. His all-around play helped him become the first Oklahoma player to ever win the Heisman Trophy. After college, Vessels went on to play professionally, first in Canada, where he won the CFL's Most Outstanding Player Award, and later in the NFL with the Baltimore Colts. Johnny Latner, 1953. Clearly at this time, it felt like there was something in the air at Notre Dame that had players winning the award, because in 1953, Johnny Latner was the next to join that list. He was one of the most complete players of his era, contributing on offense, defense, and special teams. That season, Latner rushed for 651 yards, caught passes for another 204 yards, and scored 9 touchdowns. On defense, he grabbed 4 interceptions, showing how valuable he was on both sides of the ball. He even returned kicks, which meant he was making plays no matter where the coaches lined him up. Notre Dame finished 9-0-1 in 1953, ending the year ranked 2nd in the country. In tight games, Latner's versatility often tipped the balance. He wasn't the kind of player who dominated with eye-popping numbers, but his steady impact made him the heartbeat of an undefeated team. Winning the Heisman put him in rare company, joining Angelo Bertelli and Johnny Lujack as Irish players to bring the trophy back to South Bend. After college, Latner had a short career with the Pittsburgh Steelers before a serious knee injury ended it early.
Alan Amici, 1954.
In 1954, it was Wisconsin's turn to celebrate a Heisman winner, and
Alan Amici
was the man who delivered it. Known as the Iron Horse,
Alan Amici
was a workhorse fullback who carried the ball more than anyone else in the country, and he almost never came off the field. That season, he rushed for 641 yards and scored 9 touchdowns, but the numbers only tell part of the story. Ameche was the kind of player who wore defenses down with his power and toughness. By the 4th quarter, defenders were tired of tackling him, and that's when he did his most damage. He finished his college career with over 3,200 rushing yards, which at the time set an NCAA record. Wisconsin went 7-2 that year, powered by Ameche's relentless style. He wasn't flashy, but he was dependable, consistent, and always willing to take on the tough yards when the team needed them most. His reliability earned him the respect of teammates, coaches, and voters alike. Winning the Heisman made Ameche the first player from Wisconsin to ever claim the award. After college, he went on to the NFL with the Baltimore Colts, where he became famous for scoring the game-winning touchdown in the 1958 NFL Championship, often called the greatest game ever played. Paul Hornung, 1956. The 1956 Heisman is one of the most unusual in history because the winner didn't come from a championship team. In fact, Notre Dame finished with a losing record, going 2-8. But Paul Hornung was so good, so versatile, and so important to his team that voters still gave him the trophy. Hornung lined up mainly at quarterback, but he did everything. He threw for 917 yards, ran for 420 more, scored 6 rushing touchdowns, and also handled kicking duties. On defense, he played safety and even returned kicks. His all-around play meant Notre Dame stayed competitive in games they otherwise might have lost badly. Despite the team's struggles, Hornung's talent was impossible to ignore. He was called the Golden Boy because of his blonde hair and smooth playing style, and he stood out as the one bright spot in a rough year for the Irish. After winning the Heisman, Hornung went on to become a star. With the Green Bay Packers under Vince Lombardi, he played halfback in the NFL, won multiple championships, and even took home the league MVP in 1961. Hornung's Heisman season is still unique today. He remains the only player to win the award while playing for a losing team, proof of how special he really was. John David Crow, 1957. Texas A&M had never seen a player like John David Crow, and in 1957, he delivered the school's first Heisman Trophy. He was the ultimate player for legendary coach Bear Bryant, who once said that if he had only one man to build a team around, it would be Crow. That year, Crow rushed for 562 yards and 6 touchdowns, but those numbers don't tell the full story. He also caught passes, threw for 5 touchdowns, returned kicks, and played defense. What made him stand out was his ability to change games no matter where he lined up. He was tough, physical, and smart, the type of player who could carry a team on both sides of the ball. Texas A&M went 8-3 that season, and in their biggest wins, Crow was always at the center of the action. Even in tight games, he came through with the kind of plays that swung momentum in the Aggies' favor. His Heisman win gave Texas A&M its first and only winner to date, a milestone that still makes him a legend in College Station. After college, he went on to a long NFL career, mostly with the St. Louis Cardinals, and later became a respected coach and athletic director. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Pete Dawkins, 1958. Every once in a while, a season feels like it belongs to one player. In 1958, that man was Pete Dawkins of Army, a halfback who combined brains, brawn, and leadership in a way that made him the face of college football. Dawkins was more than an athlete. He was a West Point cadet with a reputation for discipline and excellence. On the field, he rushed for 428 yards and 5 touchdowns, caught passes for another 484 yards, and threw for a score. He was versatile, dependable, and could hurt opponents in so many different ways. That season, Army posted an undefeated 8-0-1 record, and Dawkins was at the center of it all. His big game performances included dazzling runs, clutch catches, and even passing when the team needed a spark. Beyond the stats, his leadership and poise made him stand out in an era filled with tough competitors. His Heisman Trophy capped off one of Army's finest football eras. After graduation, Dawkins didn't stop at football glory. Rather, he went on to a distinguished career in the military, becoming a brigadier general, and later had success in business and public service. Billy Cannon, 1959. Halloween night, 1959. That's the moment that sealed Billy Cannon's place in college football history. Playing for LSU against Ole Miss, Cannon fielded a punt deep in his own territory, broke tackle after tackle, and raced 89 yards for a touchdown that still gets replayed today. That run won the game and gave him the Heisman Trophy. Cannon was the definition of explosive. That season, he rushed for 598 yards, caught passes for 161, threw for 2 touchdowns, and remained a constant threat on special teams. He even played defense, recording interceptions when his team needed stops. There weren't many players in the country who could do it all the way Cannon could. LSU finished 9-2, and though they narrowly missed a repeat national title, Cannon's playmaking kept them among the elite. His power, speed, and toughness gave the Tigers an edge in every big game, and his ability to shine in the brightest moments made him unforgettable. After college, Cannon went on to a successful pro career, first in the AFL, where he was a star for the Houston Oilers, then later in the NFL. Though his life had its ups and downs off the field, his 1959 season remains one of the most iconic in college football lore. Billy Cannon's Heisman wasn't only about numbers, it was also about the moment, and few players in history ever had one as defining as that Halloween night run. Joe Bellino, 1960. In 1960, Navy's Joe Bellino became the first player from the school to win the Heisman Trophy. People called him the Winchester Rifle because even though he was only 5 feet 9 inches, he was quick, powerful, and always ready to strike. That season, Bellino rushed for 834 yards and scored 17 touchdowns. He was a runner who caught passes, returned kicks, and even played defense when needed. No matter where the coach put him, Bellino found a way to make big plays. With Bellino leading the way, Navy went 9-1 and earned a spot in the Orange Bowl against Missouri. He gave the team confidence and turned them into one of the toughest programs in the country during that time. After college, Bellino served in the Navy before a short pro career with the Boston Patriots. Even though his time in pro football was brief, his college career had already made history. Ernie Davis, 1961. In 1961, Syracuse running back Ernie Davis made history. He became the first African-American player to ever win the Heisman Trophy. His mix of speed, strength, and grace made him almost impossible to stop. That season, Davis ran for 823 yards and scored 15 touchdowns. He could break tackles with power, but also glide past defenders with smooth moves. His teammates looked up to him, not only for his skills, but for his calm and steady leadership. Syracuse finished 8-3 and went to the Liberty Bowl, where Davis capped off his career with a big performance against Miami. His play kept Syracuse among the top programs in the country, following the national title they won 2 years earlier. Sadly, Davis never got the chance to play in the NFL. After being drafted first overall by Washington and then traded to the Cleveland Browns, he was diagnosed with leukemia and passed away at 23 years old. Even though his life was short, Ernie Davis's impact was huge. He broke barriers, inspired countless young athletes, and left behind a legacy of courage and excellence. Terry Baker, 1962. On the West Coast, football didn't always get the same spotlight as the big programs back east. But in 1962, Oregon State's Terry Baker changed that. He became the first player from the Pacific Northwest and still the only one from Oregon State to win the Heisman Trophy. Baker was a left-handed quarterback who could beat defenses with both his arm and his legs. That year, he passed for 1,723 yards and also rushed for 538, showing the balance that made him so dangerous. His most famous play came in the Liberty Bowl, when he sprinted 99 yards for a touchdown, which is a highlight that still stands as one of the longest runs in bowl history. Oregon State finished the season 9-2, and Baker's mix of brains and talent, he was also a top student, made him stand out even more. His Heisman win proved that stars could rise from anywhere, not the traditional powerhouses. After college, Baker was drafted by the Los Angeles Rams and later played briefly in the Canadian Football League. While his pro career was short, his place in college football history is secure. Roger Staubach, 1963. Some players earn respect over time. Others capture it in a single season. In 1963, Navy quarterback Roger Staubach did both. He played with poise and confidence that made him the clear Heisman winner and one of the most celebrated players in college football history. Staubach threw for 1,474 yards, completed over 67% of his passes, a huge number. For that era, also added 418 rushing yards with 9 rushing touchdowns. He was smooth in the pocket, quick on his feet, and always in control of the game. Under his lead, Navy went 9-2, beat rivals like Notre Dame, and climbed as high as number 2 in the national rankings. They capped the year with a Cotton Bowl matchup against Texas, where Staubach faced the nation's top team. Beyond the numbers, Staubach's leadership stood out. He stayed calm under pressure, lifted his teammates, and made Navy football a national powerhouse again. His Heisman win marked the peak of Navy's golden era. After graduation, Staubach served in the Navy, including time in Vietnam, before starting a Hall of Fame career with the Dallas Cowboys. He became Captain America, one of the most respected quarterbacks in NFL history.
John Huarte, 1964.
At the start of the 1964 season, hardly anyone expected John Huarte to win the Heisman Trophy. He had spent most of his first 3 years at Notre Dame on the bench. But when new coach Ara Parseghian gave him the chance to start, Huarte turned into a star almost overnight. That year, he passed for 2,062 yards and 16 touchdowns, which were pretty big numbers for the time, and quickly became the leader of Parseghian's fast, modern offense. His favorite target was wide receiver Jack Snow, and together they helped Notre Dame climb all the way to number 1 in the polls. The Irish finished 9-1, narrowly missing a national championship after a late loss to USC. Still, Huarte's breakout was one of the best surprises in college football history, and his Heisman win showed how quickly fortunes could change with the right coach and opportunity. After college, Huarte played several seasons of pro football in the AFL and NFL, though he never reached the same heights as in South Bend. Even so, his 1964 season remains a turning point for Notre Dame, marking the start of a new era under Parseghian. Mike Garrett, 1965. USC has always been known for great running backs, and in 1965, Mike Garrett became the first Trojan to win the Heisman Trophy. Small at 5 feet 9 inches, Garrett made up for his size with quickness, vision, and relentless effort that wore down defenses. That season, he rushed for 1,440 yards and scored 13 touchdowns, leading the nation in rushing. He was the heart of USC's offense, carrying the ball again and again while still finding ways to break big runs. With Garrett leading the way, USC went 7-2-1 and earned a trip to the Rose Bowl. His toughness and consistency gave the Trojans an edge in close games, and his Heisman win opened the door for a long line of USC running backs who would follow in his footsteps. After college, Garrett played in both the AFL and NFL, most notably with the Kansas City Chiefs, where he won a Super Bowl in 1970. He later returned to USC as the school's athletic director, leaving a lasting mark off the field as well. Steve Spurrier, 1966. Long before he became a famous coach, Steve Spurrier was a fiery quarterback at Florida who loved to compete. In 1966, his confidence and clutch play made him the easy choice for the Heisman Trophy. That year, Spurrier threw for 2,012 yards and 16 touchdowns, guiding Florida to a 9-2 record. He wasn't only about the numbers, though. He was a leader who thrived in big moments. In a close game against Auburn, Spurrier even kicked the winning field goal himself, a moment that summed up his do-it-all mentality. Florida had never been known as a football powerhouse before Spurrier, but his play pushed the Gators into the national conversation. Fans loved his flair, and opponents respected his toughness. After college, Spurrier played in the NFL for nearly a decade, but his biggest impact came later as a coach. He returned to Florida, where his fun-and-gun offense turned the program into a national champion and made him one of the most successful coaches in SEC history. Gary Babin, 1967. Sometimes a player's legacy is defined by toughness as much as by stats. UCLA quarterback Gary Babin earned the 1967 Heisman Trophy, not only for his numbers, but for the way he carried his team through pressure and pain. That season, Babin threw for 1,359 yards, ran for 227 more, and totaled 15 touchdowns. He was steady, smart, and willing to take hits to keep the Bruins in games. His leadership kept UCLA ranked among the best teams in the country. The defining moment came against rival USC. Babin played through broken ribs in a showdown with O.J. Simpson and the Trojans. Even though USC won the game, Babin's courage impressed voters enough to secure the Heisman. After college, Babin played briefly in the NFL with Washington before moving on to a successful career in business. While his time as a pro was short, his Heisman season captured what UCLA fans admired most: grit, leadership, and heart. O.J. Simpson, 1968. By 1968, everyone in college football knew O.J. Simpson was the most dangerous runner in the country. Simpson won the Heisman Trophy and dominated the season in a way few ever had. That year, Simpson rushed for 1,880 yards and 23 touchdowns, carrying the ball more than 350 times. Defenses stacked against him, but it rarely mattered. His speed, vision, and breakaway ability made him a threat to score every time he touched the ball. USC finished 9-1-1, and Simpson's highlight reel included unforgettable long runs in big games. He was the centerpiece of the Trojans' offense, and his Heisman victory was nearly unanimous. After college, Simpson went on to an NFL career with the Buffalo Bills, where he became the first player to rush for over 2,000 yards in a season. His on-field brilliance made him one of the most famous athletes of his era. Steve Owens, 1969. Some Heisman winners dazzle with speed or flashy plays. Steve Owens of Oklahoma won his by carrying the ball more than anyone else and refusing to slow down. In 1969, he was the definition of a workhorse. Owens rushed for 1,523 yards and scored 23 touchdowns, leading the Sooners' offense almost single-handedly. Game after game, he took handoff after handoff, breaking tackles and wearing down defenses until they couldn't stop him anymore. Oklahoma finished 6-4, not one of their best records, but Owens' effort stood out so much that voters couldn't ignore him. He set an NCAA record with 17 straight games of 100 yards or more, a streak built on toughness and consistency. After college, Owens played for the Detroit Lions in the NFL, where injuries shortened his career. Still, his Heisman season at Oklahoma left a lasting mark, and his name is still remembered as one of the program's greats. Jim Plunkett, 1970. When Jim Plunkett arrived at Stanford, the program wasn't known as a football powerhouse, but by 1970, he had completely changed that story. With a powerful arm and calm presence, Plunkett led Stanford and to its first Rose Bowl in decades, also winning the Heisman Trophy along the way. That season, he threw for 2,715 yards and 18 touchdowns, huge numbers at the time. Plunkett wasn't flashy, but he was steady, accurate, and confident, the kind of quarterback who could take over a game without panicking. Stanford finished 9-3, and Plunkett capped the season by leading the Cardinal to a Rose Bowl victory over powerhouse Ohio State. It was a breakthrough moment for both him and the program, proving that Stanford could compete with the nation's best. After college, Plunkett went on to the NFL, where he had an up-and-down career that eventually peaked with 2 Super Bowl wins for the Oakland Raiders. Jim Plunkett's 1970 season is remembered not only for stats, but for lifting an underdog program to new heights and showing what strong leadership can accomplish. Pat Sullivan, 1971. Some quarterbacks are remembered not for their own talent, but for the way they lifted everyone around them. Auburn's Pat Sullivan did exactly that in 1971, winning the school's first Heisman Trophy. That season, Sullivan threw for 2,012 yards and 20 touchdowns, running Auburn's offense with poise and precision. His deep passes to star receiver Terry Beasley became one of the most feared connections in the country. If Sullivan had time in the pocket, defenses knew trouble was coming. Auburn finished 9-2, highlighted by big wins over Georgia and Alabama. Sullivan's leadership and calm style made him the steady hand the Tigers needed to compete with the SEC's toughest teams. After college, Sullivan spent several years in the NFL before returning to football as a coach, leaving his mark on the game both on and off the field. Johnny Rodgers, 1972. Every so often, a player comes along who makes the crowd hold its breath every time he touches the ball. In 1972, Nebraska's Johnny Rodgers was that player. Fast, shifty, and fearless. He turned punts, passes, and runs into highlight reel plays, earning the nickname the Jet. That season, Rodgers piled up 1,778 all-purpose yards and scored 17 touchdowns in nearly every way possible, as a receiver, runner, and return man. His most famous moment came the year before, in the 1971 Game of the Century against Oklahoma, when his punt return helped Nebraska win. By 1972, he was the clear star of college football. Nebraska finished 9-2-1, and while the team didn't win a third straight national title, Rodgers' electric play kept them among the best. He was productive, thrilling, the kind of player defenses feared and fans adored. After college, Rodgers played briefly in the NFL and also starred in the Canadian Football League. No matter the league, his reputation as a game breaker followed him. John Cappelletti, 1973. Some Heisman stories are about numbers, others are about something deeper. In 1973, Penn State running back John Cappelletti won the Heisman not only with his powerful play on the field, but with the love and strength he showed off it. That season, Cappelletti rushed for 1,522 yards and scored 17 touchdowns, leading Penn State to a perfect 12-0 record. He ran with toughness and consistency, the kind of back who could carry the ball 30 times a game and still be strong in the fourth quarter. But what made his story unforgettable was his relationship with his younger brother Joey, who was battling leukemia. Cappelletti dedicated his Heisman Trophy to Joey in an emotional moment that still stands as one of the most moving speeches in sports history. After college, Cappelletti played in the NFL with the Los Angeles Rams and San Diego Chargers. His pro career was solid, but it's his 1973 season at Penn State that people remember most. Archie Griffin, 1974. College football has seen many great running backs, but only one has ever won the Heisman Trophy twice. That journey began in 1974 when Ohio State's Archie Griffin claimed his first. Griffin wasn't the biggest or the fastest, but he was consistent, reliable, and nearly impossible to tackle. In 1974, he rushed for 1,695 yards, using quick cuts and relentless drive to move the chains again and again. Defenders knew what was coming and still couldn't stop him. Ohio State finished the season 10-2, powered by Griffin's steady production. He was the foundation of the Buckeyes' offense, the player who gave them confidence in every big game. After college, Griffin went on to a brief NFL career with the Cincinnati Bengals, but his true fame came from his unmatched legacy at Ohio State. Archie Griffin, 1975. Winning the Heisman once is hard enough. Winning it twice? That had never been done until Archie Griffin pulled it off in 1975. The Ohio State running back proved that his first trophy wasn't a fluke. Archie Griffin showed he was simply that good. In his senior season, Griffin rushed for 1,450 yards, his third straight year, over the 1,400-yard mark. He wasn't about highlight runs or flashy moves. His greatness came from consistency. Week after week, He delivered steady gains, wore down defenses, and kept the Buckeyes offense rolling. Ohio State finished 11-1, won the Big Ten, and went to the Rose Bowl again. Griffin's leadership and work ethic made him the heart of the team, and his second Heisman cemented his place in history. After college, Griffin played several years in the NFL with the Cincinnati Bengals. While his pro career was shorter than his college glory, his legacy at Ohio State has never faded. Archie Griffin's 1975 season was more than a good year. It was the year that made him the only back-to-back Heisman winner, a record that still stands today. Tony Dorsett, 1976. By the time Tony Dorsett finished his senior year at Pittsburgh, there was no doubt he was one of the greatest running backs college football had ever seen. In 1976, he not only won the Heisman Trophy, he carried Pitt to a national championship. That season, Dorsett rushed for 2,150 yards and 22 touchdowns, setting the NCAA rushing record with over 6,000 yards. Defenses built entire game plans around stopping him, but few ever came close. His speed, vision, and balance made him nearly untouchable. With Dorsett leading the way, Pitt went 12-0, capped by a Sugar Bowl victory over Georgia. His dominance made the Panthers the best team in the nation and ended a 4-decade wait for a national title. After college, Dorsett went on to a Hall of Fame career with the Dallas Cowboys, where he won a Super Bowl and continued breaking records. Earl Campbell, 1977. In 1977, Earl Campbell gave Texas something it never had before, a Heisman Trophy winner. After years of great players passing through Austin, it was Campbell's unstoppable season that finally brought the award to the Longhorns. That year, he rushed for 1,744 yards and 18 touchdowns, leading the nation in rushing and carrying Texas to an 11-0 regular season. His powerful runs and ability to take over games made him the clear choice for the Heisman. The Longhorns reached number 1 in the rankings before falling in the Cotton Bowl, but Campbell's individual greatness stood above it all. Tony became the symbol of Texas football's pride and toughness. After college, Campbell carried that same dominance into the NFL with the Houston Oilers, winning MVP and earning a Hall of Fame spot. Billy Sims, 1978. In 1978, Oklahoma's Billy Sims became the school's third Heisman Trophy winner, but his journey to the award was anything but easy. Injuries slowed him early in his career, yet when he finally got healthy, he exploded into one of the best backs in the country. That season, Sims rushed for 1,762 yards and 20 touchdowns, leading the nation in rushing. He was explosive, slippery, and had a knack for breaking big plays when Oklahoma needed them most. His consistency and highlight runs made him the obvious Heisman choice. With Sims powering the offense, Oklahoma finished 11-1 and went to the Orange Bowl, cementing their place as one of the top teams in the nation. His Heisman victory brought pride back to Norman and reminded everyone of the Sooners' tradition of great running backs. After college, Sims became the number one overall pick in the 1980 NFL Draft and was a star for the Detroit Lions before injuries cut his career short. Billy Sims' 1978 Heisman season is remembered not for the stats and the way he bounced back from setbacks to claim college football's biggest prize. Charles White, 1979. By 1979, USC had already built a reputation as Tailback U, and Charles White carried that legacy to its peak by winning the Heisman Trophy. His relentless running style and never-quit attitude made him the Trojans' latest star and the nation's best player. That season, White rushed for 2,050 yards and 19 touchdowns, leading the nation in rushing. He was tough between the tackles, quick in the open field, and at his best when the game was on the line. USC went 11-0 and won, capped by a Rose Bowl win over Ohio State, where White sealed his Heisman campaign with 247 yards and a game-winning touchdown. It was the perfect finish to a season of dominance. After college, White went on to the NFL with the Cleveland Browns and Los Angeles Rams. Though his career had ups and downs, he eventually captured the 1987 NFL rushing title with the Rams. But for USC fans, his lasting legacy will always be as one of the greatest Trojans ever to wear the uniform. Marcus Allen, 1981. Before 1981, no player in college football history had ever rushed for more than 2,000 yards in a season. Marcus Allen of USC changed that, rewriting the record books on his way to the Heisman Trophy. That year, Allen ran for 2,342 yards and 22 touchdowns, averaging more than 200 yards per game. He was quick, smooth, patient, and had the vision to find holes that others would miss. Once he broke into the open field, the run usually ended in the end zone. USC went 9-3, and Allen's historic season carried the Trojans every step of the way. He became the second straight USC running back to win the Heisman, adding to the school's reputation as a factory for star tailbacks. After college, Allen moved on to the NFL, where he became both a Super Bowl MVP and league MVP with the Los Angeles Raiders, earning a spot in the Hall of Fame. Herschel Walker, 1982. By the time Herschel Walker reached his junior year at Georgia, he was already a legend. The only question left was when he would finally win the Heisman Trophy, and in 1982, he got it. That season, Walker rushed for 1,752 yards and 16 touchdowns, powering Georgia to an undefeated regular season and a Sugar Bowl appearance. His mix of size, speed, and pure willpower made him almost impossible to stop, no matter who lined up across from him. Georgia went 11-1, finishing number 4 in the nation, and Walker's long-awaited Heisman win felt like the reward for 3 years of dominance. He became the first Georgia player to ever take home the award. After college, Walker went on to a long pro career, starring in both the USFL and NFL, and later becoming one of the most versatile athletes of his era. Mike Rozier, 1983. In the early 1980s, Nebraska was known for running the football better than anyone, and in 1983, Mike Rozier became the face of that tradition. His record-breaking season earned him the Heisman Trophy and cemented his place among the greatest backs in college football history. That year, Rozier rushed for 2,148 yards and scored 29 touchdowns, averaging nearly 8 yards per carry. His speed and balance made him dangerous on every snap, and he had a knack for breaking long runs that crushed defenses. Nebraska went 12-1, reaching the national championship game against Miami in the Orange Bowl. Even though the Huskers lost in a classic finish, Rozier's Heisman campaign stood out as one of the most dominant seasons ever by a running back. After college, Rozier went on to play in the USFL before moving to the NFL, where he became a Pro Bowl running back for the Houston Oilers. Doug Flutie, 1984. Some Heisman winners are remembered for their stats, others for one play. Doug Flutie had both, but it was his famous Hail Mary that sealed his place in college football history and made his 1984 Heisman Trophy unforgettable. That season, the 5'9" Boston College quarterback threw for 3,454 yards and 27 touchdowns, proving that size didn't matter when it came to talent and leadership. He played fast, fearless football and kept his team in every game. The defining moment came against Miami, when Flutie launched a 48-yard touchdown pass as time expired to win the game. That single play became the lasting image of his Heisman year, turning him into a national star overnight. Boston College finished 10-2, their best season in decades, and Flutie's Heisman brought national respect to a program not used to the spotlight. Bo Jackson, 1985. When people talk about pure athletic talent, Bo Jackson's name is always near the top. In 1985, he showed why by winning the Heisman Trophy at Auburn, proving he was strong and fast. At times, it did feel like he was unstoppable. That season, Bo rushed for 1,786 yards and 17 touchdowns, running past defenders one play and through them the next. His rare mix of size and speed made him a nightmare for defenses, and his highlight runs turned him into a national sensation. Auburn finished 8-4, but Bo's individual brilliance was too big to overlook. He became the school's second Heisman winner and gave fans one of the most memorable seasons of the decade. After college, Bo went on to star in both the NFL and MLB, becoming one of the most famous two-sport athletes in history.
Vinny Testaverde.
1986. Some quarterbacks win games. Others define a season. In 1986,
Vinny Testaverde.
did both, leading the Miami Hurricanes with the poise of a veteran and the arm of a future number. 1 draft pick. That year, he threw for 2,557 yards and 26 touchdowns, guiding Miami to an undefeated regular season and the number one ranking in the country. His accuracy, decision-making, and ability to command the offense made him the clear Heisman favorite.
Testaverde
Became the first Miami player to win the Heisman Trophy, and his success helped turn the Hurricanes into a powerhouse program that would dominate college football for years. Though Miami fell short in the Fiesta Bowl against Penn State, nothing could take away what they
Testaverde.
accomplished that season. Tim Brown, 1987. Every so often, a player comes along who feels faster than everyone else on the field. In 1987, that was Tim Brown at Notre Dame. Nicknamed the Rocket before the Rocket, he could change a game in seconds. Whether it was catching a deep pass, returning a punt, or taking a kick off the distance. That year, he totaled 1,847 all-purpose yards and found the end zone in almost every way possible. His explosiveness and highlight plays made him impossible to ignore, and he became the first wide receiver ever to win the Heisman Trophy. Notre Dame didn't contend for a title that season, but Brown's brilliance stood on its own. His Heisman win broke the mold, showing the award wasn't only for quarterbacks and running backs, and that it could go to the most electric player in the country. Barry Sanders, 1988. If there's one Heisman season that feels untouchable, it's Barry Sanders in 1988. At Oklahoma State, he didn't only break records, he shattered them in a way that still leaves people shaking their heads. That year, Sanders rushed for an astonishing 2,628 yards and 37 rushing touchdowns in 11 games. Add in kick returns and bowl stats, and his total climbs to over 3,200 yards and 42 touchdowns. It was a season unlike anything college football had ever seen. What made it more incredible was how he did it. Sanders wasn't only fast, he had unmatched balance, cutting one way, spinning the next, leaving defenders diving at air. His runs were a combination of big plays and jaw-dropping moments. Oklahoma State finished 10-2, but Sanders' performance was the story of the year. His Heisman run is still considered by many the greatest individual season in the history of the sport. Andre Ware, 1989. Before the spread offense took over college football, Andre Ware gave the world a preview. In 1989 at Houston, he ran the run-and-shoot offense to perfection, piling up numbers that seemed almost unreal for the time. That season, Ware threw for 4,699 yards and 46 touchdowns, both unheard of in that era. Week after week, he shredded defenses with quick reads, fast throws, and deep strikes, leading the Cougars to an explosive 9-2 record. What made his Heisman run even more impressive was how far ahead of the curve he was. College football was still dominated by power-running games, yet Ware showed that a pass-heavy attack could not only win games, but also capture the sport's top award. He became the first African-American quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy, making his victory both historic and groundbreaking. Ty Detmer, 1990. In 1990, the Heisman Trophy didn't go to a powerhouse program. Instead, it went to BYU, and to a quarterback who made the nation take notice. Ty Detmer wasn't the biggest or the fastest, but his arm, accuracy, and toughness turned him into a record breaker. That season, Detmer threw for 5,188 yards and 41 touchdowns. Numbers almost unthinkable at the time. His crowning moment came against number 1 Miami, when he led BYU to a stunning 28-21 upset. That win put him firmly on the map and proved he could carve up even the toughest defenses. Detmer's Heisman victory showed that a player from a smaller program could outshine the big schools. He finished his career as one of the most productive passers in college football history, setting the stage for future system quarterbacks to be taken seriously. Ty Detmer's 1990 season was about more than stats. It proved that greatness could in fact come from anywhere. Desmond Howard, 1991. At Michigan in 1991, every time Desmond Howard touched the ball, fans leaned forward because something special might happen. He was a wide receiver with a spark that could flip a game in an instant. That season, he delivered 23 touchdowns and nearly 1,900 all-purpose yards. Whether it was hauling in deep passes, slicing through punt coverage, or breaking tackles after short catches, Howard always seemed to find the end zone. His most famous moment came against Ohio State when he returned to punt 93 yards, then struck the Heisman pose in the end zone. That single gesture captured his season. Michigan went 10-2, but Howard's brilliance was the story of the year. Gino Torretta, 1992. By 1992, Miami wasn't a mere team. They were a dynasty, loaded with talent, swagger, and a reputation for winning big games. The Hurricanes were the kings of college football. Leading them was quarterback Gino Torretta, the steady hand behind the storm. That season, Torretta threw for 3,060 yards and 19 touchdowns, guiding Miami to an undefeated regular season and a spot in the Sugar Bowl for the national title. He wasn't flashy, but he was reliable, making the right throws in a program stacked with stars. His Heisman win made him the second Miami quarterback to capture the award, following
Vinny Testaverde
in 1986. The season ended in disappointment with a loss to Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, but Torretta's role in keeping Miami's dominance alive couldn't be denied. Charlie Ward, 1993. Some athletes have options, and Charlie Ward had more than most. In 1993, he wasn't a mere Florida State's quarterback. He was also a future NBA guard. But on the football field, he delivered one of the most complete Heisman seasons ever. That year, Ward threw for 3,032 yards and 27 touchdowns, adding another 339 yards and 4 scores on the ground. More than the stats, he ran Bobby Bowden's fast-paced offense with poise, leading Florida State to its first national championship. Ward's calm presence and clutch play in big games, including a win over Nebraska in the Orange Bowl, made him stand out as the clear Heisman choice. He remains one of the rare Heisman winners who never played in the NFL, choosing instead to enjoy a long NBA career with the New York Knicks. Rashaan Salaam, 1994. In 1994, Colorado had a star who rewrote the record book. Rashaan Salaam powered his way to one of the greatest rushing seasons in college football history, making the Heisman race an easy decision. That year, Salaam ran for 2,055 yards and 24 touchdowns, becoming only the 4th player ever to top 2,000 rushing yards in a season. He averaged more than 6 yards per carry, and his consistency, game after game of huge runs and long drives, made him nearly impossible to stop. Colorado finished 11-1, capped by a Fiesta Bowl win over Notre Dame, but Salaam was the centerpiece. His strength, vision, and endurance defined the Buffalo's offense and made him a clear Heisman choice. Eddie George, 1995. Eddie George was the heartbeat of Ohio State's offense in 1995, carrying the ball with power, precision, and consistency that left defenses exhausted. He rushed for 1,927 yards and 24 touchdowns, highlighted by a 314-yard performance against Michigan that solidified his Heisman bid. Week after week, George delivered the kind of performances that defined the Buckeyes' season. Ohio State finished 11-2, but George's dominance on the field was the clear story. His 1995 Heisman season showcased both talent and relentless work ethic. Danny Wuerffel, 1996. Danny Wuerffel orchestrated one of the most prolific passing seasons in college football history at Florida in 1996. Turning Steve Spurrier's fun and gun offense into a national showcase. That year, Wuerffel threw for 3,625 yards and 39 touchdowns, guiding the Gators to a 12-1 record and a national championship in the Sugar Bowl rematch against Florida State. His quick decisions, accuracy, and leadership made Florida nearly unstoppable, and he consistently put up huge numbers against top-ranked opponents. Wuerffel became Florida's second Heisman winner and the first under Spurrier's coaching, showing that a quarterback in a pass-heavy system could dominate while still running his team efficiently. Ricky Williams, 1998. Ricky Williams won the Heisman Trophy in 1998 thanks to one of the most productive rushing seasons in college football that year. He ran for 2,124 yards and scored 27 touchdowns, leading the nation in rushing and dominating as Texas's primary offensive weapon. His consistency and ability to make plays in key moments made him the clear choice for college football's top individual award. Williams' performance highlighted his vision, balance, and skill, all of which were central to his Heisman-winning campaign. The 1998 Heisman recognized him not for raw numbers, but for being the most impactful player in the country that season.
Chris Winkie.
2000.
Chris Winkie.
Heisman season was unlike any other in college football history. At 28 years old, he was far older than his teammates and opponents, having spent several years playing minor league baseball before transferring to Florida State. That extra experience gave him a level of poise, leadership, and field awareness few quarterbacks could match. In 2000, Winkie threw for 4,167 yards and 33 touchdowns, guiding the Seminoles to a 10-2 record and a number 3 national ranking. Week after week, he managed Florida State's high-powered offense with efficiency, making precise reads and delivering in key moments. While he wasn't always the flashiest player on the field, his consistency and decision-making set him apart in a season full of talented players.
Winkie
Became the oldest player ever to win the Heisman, proving that experience and maturity could also shine as brightly as youthful athleticism. Eric Crouch, 2001. Eric Crouch's Heisman-winning season in 2001 was defined by his versatility and the way he made Nebraska's offense nearly impossible to stop. Playing in the option attack, Crouch was a dual-threat weapon who could beat defenses with his arm or his legs. That year, he passed for 1,510 yards and 19 touchdowns, while rushing for 1,115 yards and 14 more scores, showing a rare combination of speed, vision, and decision-making. His ability to read defenses and make split-second choices kept Nebraska competitive in every game and made him a nightmare for opposing coordinators. Nebraska finished the season 11-2, and Crouch's performance stood out not statistically, but in how he controlled the tempo of the offense. He became the 4th Nebraska player to win the Heisman, highlighting the school's tradition of producing elite quarterbacks. Carson Palmer, 2002. Carson Palmer won the Heisman Trophy in 2002 by leading USC's offense with precision and consistency. That season, he threw for 3,942 yards and 33 touchdowns, completing passes at a high rate while guiding USC to an 11-2 record. Palmer's ability to read defenses and make accurate throws under pressure helped the Trojans compete in a challenging Pac-10 schedule. He became USC's first Heisman-winning quarterback since 1978, underscoring his role as the centerpiece of the team's offensive success. The 2002 Heisman recognized Palmer's combination of passing production, leadership, and efficiency, making him the nation's top player in a year full of strong contenders. Jason White, 2003. Jason White won the Heisman Trophy in 2003 after leading Oklahoma with remarkable efficiency and leadership. Despite recovering from multiple knee injuries earlier in his career, he threw for 3,846 yards and 40 touchdowns, guiding the Sooners to a 12-1 record and a Big 12 championship. White's ability to make accurate throws, manage the offense, and perform in key games set him apart from other contenders. He was central to Oklahoma's high-powered offense, which consistently ranked among the nation's best in scoring and yardage. His Heisman win reflected both his statistical production and his perseverance, highlighting a player who overcame adversity to become the nation's top football performer in 2003.
Matt Leinart,
2004. USC's offense dominated college football in 2004, and Matt Leinart was at the center of it, directing the Trojans with poise and consistency. That season, he threw for 3,322 yards and 33 touchdowns while leading USC to a 13-0 record and a national championship in the Orange Bowl. Leinart's combination of accuracy, leadership, and ability to perform in high-pressure games made him the clear choice for the Heisman Trophy. He became USC's second Heisman-winning quarterback in 3 years, following Carson Palmer, and cemented his place in the program's history. After college, Leinart was selected 10th overall in the 2006 NFL Draft by the Arizona Cardinals and went on to have a 7-year NFL career, including stints with the Houston Texans and Oakland Raiders. Reggie Bush, 2005. College football's spotlight in 2005 often shone brightest on USC's dynamic offense, where Reggie Bush electrified defenses with his speed and versatility. That season, he rushed for 1,740 yards and 18 touchdowns, while adding 478 receiving yards, making him a key playmaker in USC's undefeated regular season. Bush's combination of rushing, receiving, and return ability helped the Trojans reach the BCS National Championship game, though they ultimately fell to Texas in a Rose Bowl Classic. His explosive all-around play still earned him the Heisman Trophy, though the award was later vacated by the NCAA in 2010. After college, Bush was selected second overall in the 2006 NFL Draft by the New Orleans Saints. He enjoyed a productive NFL career, winning a Super Bowl with the Saints in the 2009 season, and later transitioned into sports media and philanthropy. 2006, Troy Smith. Leading Ohio State's offense in 2006, Troy Smith showcased accuracy, leadership, and poise. Guiding the Buckeyes through a dominant season, he threw for 2,542 yards and 30 touchdowns, added 204 rushing yards, and helped Ohio State finish 12-1, earning a spot in the BCS National Championship game. Smith's ability to make precise reads and manage a balanced offense made him the nation's standout player, earning him the Heisman Trophy. His calm command of the field and consistency in big games were key to Ohio State's success that year. After college, Smith was selected in the 5th round of the 2007 NFL Draft by the Baltimore Ravens and went on to play in the NFL with the Ravens and San Francisco 49ers. 2007, Tim Tebow. In 2007, Florida's offense revolved around Tim Tebow, a unique dual-threat quarterback who terrorized defenses with both his arm and legs. That season, he threw for 3,286 yards and 32 touchdowns, while rushing for 895 yards and 23 more scores. Tebow became the first sophomore in history to win the Heisman Trophy, a landmark moment in college football. Though Florida didn't capture the national title that year, his leadership and record-setting production made him unforgettable. After college, Tebow played in the NFL for the Denver Broncos and New York Jets, later pursued a professional baseball career, and transitioned into broadcasting and philanthropy. 2008, Sam Bradford. The Sooners' offense in 2008 revolved around precision passing, and Sam Bradford emerged as the nation's top quarterback. He threw for 4,720 yards and 50 touchdowns, setting school and national marks, while guiding Oklahoma to a 12-2 record. Bradford's ability to read defenses, make quick decisions, and consistently deliver big plays made him the clear choice for the Heisman Trophy. His leadership on the field was a key factor in keeping the Sooners' high-powered offense among the nation's best. Selected first overall in the 2010 NFL Draft by the St. Louis Rams, Bradford went on to play several seasons in the NFL with the Rams, Philadelphia Eagles, and Minnesota Vikings. 2009, Mark Ingram 2. Alabama's offense leaned on a powerful running game in 2009, and Mark Ingram 2 proved unstoppable. He rushed for 1,658 yards and 17 touchdowns, consistently turning short gains into big plays and helping the Crimson Tide dominate the SEC. Ingram's impact went beyond the stat sheet. He controlled the tempo of games, wore down defenses, and delivered in key moments against top-ranked opponents. That combination of productivity and reliability earned him the Heisman Trophy, making him the first Alabama player to win the award. After college, Ingram was selected 28th overall in the 2011 NFL Draft by the New Orleans Saints. He enjoyed a long professional career, earning a Super Bowl ring in the 2009 season and becoming one of the league's most consistent running backs. 2010, Cam Newton. The 2010 season belonged to Auburn, and Cam Newton was impossible to ignore. He passed for 2,854 yards and 30 touchdowns, while adding 1,473 rushing yards and 20 more scores, combining aerial and ground threats in a way few quarterbacks ever had. Newton's leadership and ability to make plays in critical moments propelled Auburn to a 14-0 record and a national championship, and his performance earned him the Heisman Trophy. His dominance was clear not only in stats, but in the way he controlled games against top opponents week after week. After college, Newton was selected first overall in the 2011 NFL Draft by the Carolina Panthers. He became a three-time NFL MVP finalist, won the 2015 NFL MVP, and led the Panthers to Super Bowl 50. 2011, Robert Griffin III.
Robert Griffin III's season at Baylor in 2011
was electrifying, blending athleticism with precision passing in ways that made him a standout nationally. He threw for 4,293 yards and 37 touchdowns, while rushing for 699 yards and 10 more scores, keeping defenses constantly off balance. Baylor wasn't a traditional powerhouse. Robert Griffin III's performance turned heads week after week. He made big plays in critical moments, lifted a young team in tight contests, and became the centerpiece of Baylor's offense. His Heisman win reflected both his dual threat ability and his impact on a program not usually in the national spotlight. After college, Griffin was the second overall pick in the 2012 NFL Draft by the Washington Redskins. He earned Offensive Rookie of the Year honors, went to a Pro Bowl, and became known for his electrifying mobility and highlight reel plays in the NFL. 2012.
Johnny Manziel.
Few players captured national attention like
Johnny Manziel
did at Texas A&M in 2012. Known as Johnny Football, he dazzled with improvisation and timing, turning broken plays into touchdowns. The stats were staggering: 3,706 passing yards with 26 touchdowns, plus 1,410 rushing yards and 21 rushing scores.
Manziel's
Heisman wasn't merely about numbers. He brought excitement to every game, energized his teammates, and put Texas A&M back on the national map. Defenses struggled to contain his dual-threat style, and highlight plays became routine. After college,
Manziel
was selected 22nd overall in the 2014 NFL Draft by the Cleveland Browns. His professional career was short-lived, but he remains one of the most electrifying Heisman winners in recent memory, remembered for creativity and personality on and off the field. 2013, Jameis Winston. As a redshirt freshman, Jameis Winston looked like he had been running Florida State's offense for years. Calm in the pocket, fearless when pushing the ball downfield, Winston piled up 4,057 passing yards and 40 touchdowns, while completing nearly 67% of his throws. Beyond stats, it was the way he led Florida State to a perfect season that cemented his place in history. His Heisman came in the same year he guided the Seminoles to a national championship, highlighted by a last-minute touchdown drive against Auburn in the title game. Drafted first overall in 2015 by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Winston's NFL career has been a roller coaster, filled with flashes of brilliance mixed with inconsistency. Still, his 2013 season remains one of the most dominant campaigns in college football, and he was the youngest player at the time to ever win the Heisman. 2014.
Marcus Mariota
Played quarterback like he was gliding. At Oregon, he turned Chip Kelly's spread scheme into a machine, throwing for 4,454 yards and 42 touchdowns with 4 picks, while rushing for 770 yards and 15 more scores. Few players ever combined efficiency and explosiveness so seamlessly. That year,
Mariota
became the first Hawaiian-born player and the first Oregon Duck to claim the Heisman. His calm presence and lightning-fast reads powered Oregon all the way to the first-ever college football playoff national championship game, a landmark season for both him and the program. Even today,
Mariota's
2014 campaign stands as a blueprint for what a dual-threat quarterback can be: efficient, unselfish, and devastatingly effective. 2015, Derrick Henry. Defenders knew what was coming and still couldn't stop it. At 6 feet 3 inches and 240 pounds, Derrick Henry bulldozed through the SEC like a runaway train, piling up 2,219 rushing yards and 28 touchdowns. His punishing style wore down defenses week after week, capped by a record-breaking workload of 395 carries. Henry's dominance powered Alabama to a national championship and marked a shift back toward old-school, run-heavy football in a game increasingly driven by quarterbacks. He was the second Alabama player ever to win the Heisman, but the first running back from the school to do it. 2016, Lamar Jackson. At 19 years old, Lamar Jackson electrified college football in a way few had before. Playing for Louisville, he accounted for 3,543 passing yards, 30 passing touchdowns, and added 1,571 rushing yards with 21 more scores. Defenses looked helpless because Lamar Jackson was simply faster, quicker, and more creative than anyone else on the field. What made Jackson's Heisman season unforgettable wasn't only the numbers, but the way he did it, hurdling defenders, spinning out of sacks, and turning broken plays into highlight reels. He became the youngest Heisman winner ever, showing that raw athleticism and vision could redefine the quarterback position. Today, Jackson has carried that same electricity into the NFL with the Baltimore Ravens, where he's an MVP and one of the league's most feared dual-threat quarterbacks. His 2016 campaign remains the origin story of a player still reshaping the sport at the highest level. 2017, Baker Mayfield. Oklahoma had seen plenty of great quarterbacks, but Baker Mayfield brought a fire that was impossible to ignore. A former walk-on who refused to quit, he threw for 4,627 yards and 43 touchdowns while completing over 70% of his passes. Every game felt like a statement and screamed to everyone that he belonged, and no one could outcompete him. His Heisman was more than stats. It was about attitude. Mayfield played with a chip on his shoulder, energizing teammates and infuriating opponents, all while leading the Sooners to the college football playoff. His swagger made him polarizing, but also unforgettable. That underdog edge carried him into the NFL, where he was drafted first overall in 2018. He's had ups and downs since, but his Heisman season at Oklahoma remains the definitive chapter in his story. 2018, Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray wasn't supposed to be here, at least not in football. A top baseball prospect with a professional contract in hand, he chose to spend one more season at Oklahoma, and it turned into magic. Murray threw for 4,361 yards and 42 touchdowns, while adding over 1,000 rushing yards and 12 more scores, becoming one of the most efficient dual-threat quarterbacks the game had ever seen. What set him apart was how easy he made it look. At 5 feet 10 inches, he blurred past defenders with sprinter speed, then dropped pinpoint passes that stretched defenses to their breaking point. His play carried the Sooners to a second straight college football playoff appearance, making him the second consecutive Oklahoma quarterback to win the Heisman. 2019, Joe Burrow. Some seasons feel inevitable only in hindsight, and Joe Burrow's 2019 campaign was one of them. A transfer who had been overlooked at Ohio State, he arrived at LSU with little fanfare, but shockingly delivered arguably the greatest season a college quarterback has ever played. Burrow threw for 5,671 yards and 60 touchdowns, breaking records while dismantling one powerhouse after another. Alongside a stacked roster, he led the Tigers to a perfect season and a national championship, capped by a dominant win over Clemson. His calm under pressure and surgical precision turned LSU's offense into an unstoppable force. That year, Burrow was more than a Heisman winner. He became the face of a football renaissance in Baton Rouge, and in the NFL, with the Cincinnati Bengals, he's carried that same character, already guiding his team to a Super Bowl appearance. 2020, Devonta Smith. In an era dominated by quarterbacks, Devonta Smith broke the mold. Devonta Smith became the first wideout to take the trophy since Desmond Howard in 1991. With a slim and unassuming frame, he made defenders look helpless with precise routes, soft hands, and breakaway speed. Smith finished the season with 117 catches for 1,856 yards and 23 touchdowns, numbers that would be eye-popping in a video game, let alone the SEC. His performances on the biggest stages, including a 3-touchdown first half in the national championship against Ohio State, which cemented his place in history. What made his story special was the quiet dominance. He wasn't the loudest star on the field, but every week he was the most reliable. Today, he's continuing that excellence with the Philadelphia Eagles, proving that finesse can dominate as much as power. 2021, Bryce Young. Alabama had long been stocked with NFL-level players, but Bryce Young showed that even in the middle of all that talent, the quarterback could be the difference. In his first year as a starter, the sophomore threw for 4,872 yards and 47 touchdowns, guiding the Crimson Tide offense with calm precision. The turning point came in the SEC championship against Georgia's vaunted defense. Under relentless pressure, Young delivered over 400 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, a showcase that sealed his Heisman. He also made history as the first Alabama quarterback ever to win the award, a surprising milestone for such a dominant program. Young's season proved that while Alabama had stars everywhere, it was his composure and decision-making that elevated them to the next level. Now, with the Carolina Panthers, his college legacy remains defined by that rare blend of poise and explosiveness. 2022, Caleb Williams. When Caleb Williams followed Coach Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma to USC, expectations were sky high, but somehow he exceeded them. With a cannon arm and magician's flair for escaping pressure, Williams threw for 4,537 yards, 42 touchdowns, and added nearly 400 rushing yards with 10 more scores. What made him different was production mixed with creativity. He turned busted plays into highlights, flicking no-look passes and sprinting away from defenders who never had a chance. His poise gave USC an instant revival, bringing the Trojans back into national relevance and making him the school's first Heisman winner since Matt Leinart in 2004. Williams' season felt like a preview of the NFL's next wave of superstar quarterbacks who were improvisational, fearless, and electric. Even now, he's seen as a generational prospect with all eyes on how his pro career will unfold. 2023, Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels didn't only play quarterback at LSU, instead, he redefined the game. With a smooth throwing motion and track speed in the open field, he threw for 3,812 yards and 40 touchdowns, while rushing for 1,134 yards and 10 more scores. Few players have ever blended passing accuracy and rushing explosiveness so perfectly. His Heisman moment came against Florida, where he piled up 372 passing yards and 234 rushing yards in a single game. Jayden Daniels is the first player in FBS history to top 350 through the air and 200 on the ground in the same night. Daniels joined Billy Cannon and Joe Burrow as just the third LSU player to win the Heisman, and he did it with the highest single-season passer efficiency rating ever recorded. Now, with the Washington Commanders, his blend of precision and speed has fans believing he can change the direction of a franchise. 2024, Travis Hunter. Every so often, a player comes along who feels like a throwback and a glimpse of the future all at once. In 2024, that player was Travis Hunter. At Colorado, under the spotlight of Deion Sanders, he lined up at cornerback and wide receiver. Travis Hunter was not dabbling in both. He was excelling. Hunter hauled in over 1,100 receiving yards with 10 touchdowns on offense, while also locking down opponents as one of the nation's top defensive backs. Week after week, he stayed on the field for 100 snaps or more, something almost unthinkable in today's game. His versatility and stamina earned him the Heisman Trophy, making him the first two-way player to win since Charles Woodson in 1997. It was more than an award. It was a reminder that football's old-school legends, the ones who played everywhere, can still exist in the modern era. Ohio State versus Michigan. College football is full of rivalries, but only one of them is simply called the game. When the Ohio State Buckeyes play the Michigan Wolverines, everything else fades into the background. This rivalry dates back to 1897, and it was never friendly. Long before football, Ohio and Michigan already shared political and cultural tension. When the two schools began competing on the field, that tension turned into something permanent. Both programs recruit in the same territory, rule the Midwest, and judge their seasons by one result every single year. Historically, it doesn't get much closer than this. Michigan currently holds the all-time edge at 62-53-6, a reminder that no era ever truly dominates forever. At Ohio State, players are taught to cross out the letter M during rivalry week. At Michigan, entire coaching careers are defined by one question: Did you beat Ohio State? And in 2021, Michigan did just that. After years of frustration, Michigan dominated Ohio State 42-27 in snowy Ann Arbor. The win ended an 8-game losing streak, launched Michigan back into national relevance, and shifted the balance of power. Michigan followed up with back-to-back wins in Columbus and Ann Arbor, proving that the 2021 result wasn't a fluke, and reminding everyone that the game can swing eras, not just seasons. The game has decided Big Ten championships, national title hopes, and playoff appearances. Some seasons are remembered for nothing more than what happened on one cold afternoon in November. Alabama versus Auburn. The Iron Bowl, simply put, is a statewide identity crisis. In Alabama, there are no professional teams. There are no neutral fans. You don't pick sides. You're born into one. And once you are, it sticks with you for life. The Alabama Crimson Tide and the Auburn Tigers are barely 150 miles apart, and it comes as no surprise that both teams scout players from the same high schools, chase the same players, and fight over the same pride. Every Iron Bowl decides who gets bragging rights for an entire year, at work, at school, and at the dinner table. On paper, Alabama leads the series 52-37-1. But in this rivalry, history doesn't guarantee anything. The Iron Bowl has produced some of the wildest moments college football has ever seen. One such moment happened in 1972 and 1973 when Auburn blocked 2 Alabama punts in back-to-back Iron Bowls, returning both for touchdowns. The moments crushed Alabama's title hopes and cemented the Iron Bowl's reputation for sudden, season-ending heartbreak. Auburn's comeback in 2010 also sticks out. Alabama led 24-0 at halftime. Then Cam Newton happened. Auburn stormed back to win 28-27, flipping the game, the season, and eventually the national championship race. For Auburn fans, it's one of the greatest comebacks ever. For Alabama fans, it still hurts. This matchup has also featured last-second miracles. In 2013, the prayer at Jordan-Hare became a thing. With seconds left, Auburn completed a tipped Hail Mary touchdown to steal a win over Alabama. It felt impossible, and then it happened. 1 week later, the rivalry somehow found a way to top itself. Alabama enters this matchup expected to win. Losing is unforgivable. And for Auburn, there's something special about ruining Alabama's season. It's not just an upset. It's a tradition. Texas versus Oklahoma. Texas and Oklahoma have been going at it since 1900, and almost every year they settle it in the same place, Dallas, right in the middle of the Texas State Fair. Inside the stadium, the crowd is split perfectly down the middle, burnt orange on one side, crimson on the other. There's no home field, there's no neutral section, just noise, tension, and 2 fan bases daring the other to blink first. The rivalry itself has always been close, and that's what makes it hurt so much. The Texas Longhorns currently hold the all-time series edge at 65-51-5, but no lead ever feels safe in this game, and records don't matter that much. In 2000, Texas entered the game ranked number 11 and heavily favored. Oklahoma, still rebuilding, pulled off a stunning 63-14 blowout. That win announced the Sooners' return to national relevance and helped launch a new era under Bob Stoops. That balance is exactly why it matters. For Texas, this game is about proving they're still the standard of the Lone Star State, that tradition and power still mean something. For the Oklahoma Sooners, it's simpler. Winning matters more than hype, and results speak louder than branding. This matchup has shaped conference titles and national championship runs, as it was the case in 2008. Both teams entered undefeated and ranked in the top 5. Texas beat Oklahoma 45-35 behind quarterback Colt McCoy, a win that directly shaped the national title race and remains one of the rivalry's most consequential games. USC versus Notre Dame. USC and Notre Dame don't share a conference. They don't share a region, but for more than a century, they've shared the biggest stage in college football. This rivalry started in the 1920s, when Notre Dame Fighting Irish wanted a partner on the West Coast, and USC Trojans wanted national respect. What they built together became one of the sport's most iconic intersectional rivalries, played every year, one season in Los Angeles, the next in South Bend. In 2005, this rivalry gave us one of the most replayed plays in college football history. With seconds left, USC quarterback sneak attempts were literally pushed into the end zone by Reggie Bush, lifting USC to a 34-31 win. The play became known forever as the Bush Push. Over the years, Notre Dame boasts more wins in this rivalry, leading the all-time series 51-38-5. But this matchup has never been about who dominates. It's about prestige. USC represents West Coast speed, flash, and swagger. Notre Dame stands for tradition, independence, and a fan base that stretches across the country. For decades, this game has helped shape national championship races, decide Heisman moments, and determine who gets to call themselves college football's gold standard. Even now, in an era of constant realignment and shifting schedules, USC and Notre Dame always find a way to meet. Army versus Navy. The first meeting between the Army Black Knights and the Navy Midshipmen in 1980 kicked off one of the oldest rivalries in American sports. And it's a matchup that has nothing to do with rankings, championships, or hype. It's about honor, service, and representing something bigger than football. These aren't just student athletes, they're future officers who will one day serve the same country, no matter which side they line up on today. Over more than a century of battles, the Navy midshipmen have held a narrow edge over the Army Black Knights, leading the all-time series 64-55-7. But the record has never been the point. Army-Navy is built on discipline, physicality, and execution. Every yard is earned. Every mistake matters. There are no flashy schemes here, just toughness, preparation, and pride. What truly sets this rivalry apart is the respect. These teams fight each other for 60 minutes, then stand side by side afterward, knowing that one day they'll wear the same uniform in service. Even better, they both exercise the alma mater tradition. After the final whistle, both teams stand together and sing each other's alma maters. Winners first, losers second. It's one of the most powerful traditions in all of sports, symbolizing mutual respect after fierce competition. Florida versus Florida State. This rivalry answers one simple question every single year. Who runs the state of Florida? Florida and Florida State didn't face each other regularly until the mid-20th century, but once they did, it didn't take long for things to get heated. These programs recruit the same high schools, chase the same stars, and fight over the same bragging rights across the entire state. When this rivalry hit its peak, it became one of the biggest games in all of college football. In the 1990s especially, Florida versus Florida State felt less like a rivalry game and more like a national semifinal, with championships, top 5 rankings, and legacies hanging in the balance. The first true clash happened in 1991, when the Florida Gators and the Florida State Seminoles finally met as national powers. The rivalry officially went big time. The stakes were no longer just state pride, they were national. In 1996, after splitting the regular season matchup, the two teams met with a national title on the line. Florida dominated Florida State 52-20, winning its first national championship and turning a rivalry into a championship-deciding spectacle. The following year, Florida backed up their Sugar Bowl national championship win. In 1997, Florida and Florida State played twice in the same season. Florida State won the Sugar Bowl rematch 31-14, capturing a national championship and proving that no rivalry has ever shaped the title picture quite like this one. The Florida Gators hold an advantage in the win column, leading the all-time series 39-28-2 over the Florida State Seminoles. For Florida, this game is about defending SEC pride and keeping control at home. For Florida State, it's about proving they belong among college football's elite. Even when one program is down, this rivalry never cools off. Georgia versus Florida.
The Georgia Bulldogs and the Florida Gators don't play this game on campus. Every year, they meet in Jacksonville, turning the city into a wall of red and blue. Fans show up days early, tailgates take over parking lots, and the tension starts building long before the opening kickoff. For decades, this game has carried real consequences. Win it, and you're usually in control of the SEC East, sometimes even staring at a path to a national championship. And that's exactly what happened during the 1990s. Under Steve Spurrier, Florida flipped the rivalry on its head, winning 6 straight games from 1990 to 1996. Spurrier's aggressive style and sideline bravado added a personal edge that Georgia fans still remember. Despite this 1990s run, Georgia holds the upper hand, leading Florida 57-44-2. But no one who lives this rivalry cares much about the numbers. Georgia fans remember the 1990s vividly and how Florida crushed their championship dreams. Florida fans still smile about tormenting Georgia during its most painful eras. The atmosphere is loud, relentless, and unforgiving. There's no friendly banter, just non-stop trash talk and bragging rights that last an entire year. Alabama versus Tennessee. There was a time when Alabama versus Tennessee was the heartbeat of the SEC. For decades, the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Tennessee Volunteers were two of the conference's defining powers. When they played, championships, rankings, and national respect were usually on the line. This matchup helped shape what SEC football would eventually become. Over the years, Alabama has controlled this matchup, but in 1995, Peyton Manning, for one season, put an end to Alabama's domination. He delivered a signature performance as Tennessee upset Alabama 41-14 in Tuscaloosa. It was one of the defining wins of the Manning era, and a reminder that Tennessee still belonged among the elite. While Alabama leads this series 60-47, matchups between these two have been close. In 2009, Alabama defensive tackle Terrence Cody blocked a short field goal to preserve a 12-10 tied victory. The play kept Alabama's title run alive and became instant rivalry lore. In 2015, Alabama stopped Tennessee on a critical 4th down at the goal line in the 4th quarter, escaping with a 19-14 win. It was a gut punch for Tennessee and a snapshot of how thin the margin always is. For Alabama, this game is about protecting dominance and honoring tradition. For Tennessee, beating Alabama has always meant something deeper, a sign that the Volunteers are back and that they still belong among college football's elite. Even during years when Tennessee struggled, this matchup never felt ordinary. Wins are celebrated like championships. Losses linger for months. LSU versus Alabama. LSU and Alabama had played each other for decades, but everything changed in the 2000s. Both programs turned into annual championship contenders, and suddenly, this matchup wasn't just another SEC game. It felt like a playoff before the playoff even existed. The style never changes. It's physical, it's brutal, and it's unforgiving. When the LSU Tigers and the Alabama Crimson Tide meet, every yard has to be earned, and every mistake gets punished. Alabama has held the upper hand in this rivalry, leading the all-time series 58-27-5. But LSU fans don't think about totals. They think about moments. Night games in Baton Rouge, goal line stands, and the wins that stopped Alabama dynasties cold. In 2011, in what is regarded as the game of the century, LSU beat Alabama 9-6 in overtime in Tuscaloosa in a defensive masterpiece. No touchdowns, no margin for error. The game felt like a playoff before the playoff existed, and it instantly became one of the most famous regular season games ever. That joy didn't last long, because in 2012, Alabama got their revenge on the biggest stage, dominating LSU 21-0 in the BCS National Championship game. The shutout flipped the rivalry's momentum and cemented Alabama's dynasty under Nick Saban. For LSU, Alabama is the ultimate measuring stick, the team you have to beat to prove you belong. For Alabama, LSU is the one opponent that can truly match their strength, speed, and toughness. Texas A&M versus Texas. The Texas Longhorns and the Texas A&M Aggies represent two very different versions of the same state. Texas sees itself as the flagship, power, prestige, and a national brand. Texas A&M prides itself on loyalty, tradition, and a culture where football isn't just a game, it's a way of life. The rivalry began in 1894 with a Texas win, setting the foundation for more than a century of resentment between the Texas Longhorns and the Texas A&M Aggies. From the start, it was about control of the state, but with time, these two fought over recruiting, bragging rights, and control of Texas itself. And when they stopped playing each other regularly, the rivalry didn't fade. It hardened. Historically, Texas has dominated Texas A&M, leading 78-37-5. But that gap is exactly what keeps this rivalry burning. For Texas A&M, every win is about respect, proof that they were never the little brother. In 1999, in what was known as the Bonfire Game, Texas A&M defeated Texas 20-16 in one of the most emotional rivalry games ever played, uniting the Aggie community in grief and pride. The game was played just days after the tragic Texas A&M bonfire collapse, and it took on a meaning far beyond football. For Texas, every loss feels unacceptable, no matter the excuse. Michigan versus Michigan State. The Michigan Wolverines are the historic power, tradition, national titles, decades of prestige. The Michigan State Spartans have always been the challenger, fighting to step out of that shadow and prove they belong on the same field, at the same level. That imbalance fuels everything. In 1957, during Michigan State's national title era, Michigan State defeated Michigan during a season that ended with a national championship. It was one of the earliest signs that the Spartans weren't just a little brother, they were a legitimate power. In 1969, Michigan entered undefeated and ranked number 1. Michigan State shocked them 23-12, a loss so stunning it still echoes today, and ultimately changed the balance of this rivalry. Spartan fans viewed this as proof they belonged on the same stage as the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan State, beating Michigan is about validation. It's about being seen, about proving they were never the little brother. Michigan, losing this rivalry game is simply unacceptable. Rankings, injuries, and excuses don't matter. Matchup-wise, Michigan holds the edge with a commanding 75-38-5 record, but the numbers don't capture what this rivalry really feels like. This matchup has delivered stunning upsets, unforgettable finishes, and moments that still sting years later. Penn State versus Ohio State. When Penn State Nittany Lions joined the Big Ten, this matchup quickly became one of the conference's most important games. In 1993, Penn State made a huge statement. In just their first season as a Big Ten member, the Penn State Nittany Lions crushed the Ohio State Buckeyes 63-14. It was a loud introduction and a warning that Penn State had arrived as a conference power. In 2005, Penn State stunned Ohio State again 17-10 in Beaver Stadium during one of the earliest and loudest whiteout games. The atmosphere helped turn Beaver Stadium into one of the most feared environments in college football. Over and over again, Penn State versus Ohio State Buckeyes has decided conference titles, playoff chances, and who gets taken seriously on the national stage. Both programs recruit at an elite level. Both expect to compete every single year at an elite level. And when they meet, there's almost no room for mistakes. Ohio State holds a slight edge over Penn State, leading the all-time series 26-14. And that record explains a lot of the tension between these two, as evident in their 2016 game. With seconds left, Penn State blocked an Ohio State field goal and returned it for a touchdown, winning 24-21. The play launched Penn State to a Big Ten title and became the defining moment of the rivalry. Penn State views Ohio State as the final hurdle, the team standing between them and a Big Ten championship. These games are usually tight, physical, and decided late, as was the case in 2018 during Nick Bosa's return. Ohio State survived a tense 27-26 win in Happy Valley. It was Nick Bosa's final game as a Buckeye, and another reminder of how thin the margin always is between these programs. One turnover, one missed assignment, one moment that changes everything. Wisconsin versus Minnesota. Wisconsin versus Minnesota is one of the oldest rivalries in all of college football, and it feels like it every time they play. The Wisconsin Badgers and the Minnesota Golden Gophers first met back in 1890, launching what would become the most played rivalry in FBS history. Since then, this matchup has come to represent toughness, tradition, and pride in the upper Midwest. It's cold weather football at its core, physical, disciplined, and relentless. These teams don't just play for a win, they play for Paul Bunyan's axe, one of the most iconic trophies in the sport. When the final whistle blows, the winning team doesn't celebrate slowly. They sprint to midfield to grab it, turning the moment into something unforgettable. In 1993, after Minnesota upset Wisconsin 28-21, Gopher players sprinted to midfield and took the axe, a moment that sparked controversy and permanently cemented the post-game sprint tradition. From that point on, the race to the axe became as important as the final score. Record-wise, Minnesota built a big lead early in the rivalry. Wisconsin, meanwhile, has owned much of the modern era, and somehow, after more than a century of games, the series is still almost perfectly even, with Minnesota holding a razor-thin edge at 64-63-8. That history is exactly why this game always matters. For Wisconsin, it's about protecting modern dominance and keeping bragging rights close to home. For Minnesota, it's about tradition, reminding everyone who controlled this rivalry first. Clemson versus South Carolina. This is a polarizing matchup that cuts the state of South Carolina straight down the middle. The Clemson Tigers and the South Carolina Gamecocks aren't just playing for a win, they're playing for control of the state. Its recruits, its pride, and its bragging rights. Families are split, workplaces get awkward, and whatever happens on the field gets talked about for the next 12 months. It all started in 1896. The first meeting between the Clemson Tigers and the South Carolina Gamecocks set the tone for more than a century of in-state tension. Early on, South Carolina had the upper hand, but as Clemson rose into a national powerhouse, the balance of power shifted, and with it came a deeper kind of resentment. One of the ugliest moments in rivalry history happened in 2004, the on-field brawl. A massive fight broke out after the game, leading to suspensions for both teams' next games. It cemented Clemson, South Carolina as one of the sport's most heated rivalries. On the win column, Clemson holds the edge, leading the all-time series 74-44-4. But anyone who lives this rivalry knows the record only tells part of the story. In 2010, South Carolina stunned Clemson 29-7 in Death Valley, announcing its arrival as a legitimate SEC power under Steve Spurrier. The win shifted momentum in the rivalry and raised expectations statewide. But Clemson roared back in 2015, beating South Carolina 37-32, a win that capped an undefeated regular season and launched the Tigers into the college football playoff, and eventually a national championship era. For Clemson, this game is about protecting dominance and staying on top. For South Carolina, it's about disruption, about knocking their biggest rival off the throne and reminding everyone they're still dangerous. Miami versus Florida State. Miami versus Florida State symbolizes swagger, dominance, and control of Florida. When the Miami Hurricanes and the Florida State Seminoles rose to power at the same time, college football felt the shockwaves. In the 1980s and 1990s, this wasn't just a rivalry game, it was a national event. The winner didn't just stay relevant, the winner usually played for a national championship, and sometimes walked away with it. What separates this rivalry is attitude. Miami brings confidence, flash, and intimidation. They want you to feel them before the kickoff. Florida State brings discipline, structure, and sustained excellence. Calm, controlled, ruthless. When Miami versus Florida State collide, the game moves fast. It's physical, it's emotional. One big play can flip momentum in seconds, and the tension never really lets up. In 1991, Florida State lined up for a potential game-winning field goal. The kick sailed wide right. Miami won 17-16, costing the Seminoles a shot at the national title and beginning one of the rivalry's most painful traditions. 1 year later, same situation, same ending. Another missed field goal gave Miami a 19-16 win and reinforced the idea that this rivalry was cursed for FSU and ruthless. The series has been razor thin when it comes to numbers, Miami holding a narrow edge at 37-33. But for Florida State, beating Miami is about proving they run the state. For Miami, beating Florida State is about reclaiming power and demanding respect. Duke versus North Carolina. This rivalry may live in basketball headlines, but on the football field, it's been building its own history for over a century. The Duke Blue Devils and the North Carolina Tar Heels are separated by just a few miles, and that closeness fuels everything. These two first met in 1888, and from the beginning it was about pride and refusing to lose to a neighbor. Today, these schools compete for the same students, prestige, and bragging rights in the same backyard, which means losing is impossible to ignore. In 1948, North Carolina defeated Duke and introduced the Victory Bell, the rivalry trophy that still gets claimed every year. From that point on, the game wasn't just about winning, it was about taking something tangible back to campus. And in 2001, Duke pulled off one of the most shocking football moments in the rivalry. They erased a 20-point deficit to stun North Carolina 38-31. For Duke fans, it's still remembered as one of the program's most unlikely rivalry wins. On the football field, the rivalry has often leaned one way. North Carolina holds the edge, leading the series 65-43-4. But records have never erased the tension or the joy that comes with claiming the victory bell at midfield. North Carolina views this game as a way of maintaining superiority, about reminding Duke who's supposed to run the neighborhood. Duke views every win as a statement, a disruption, proof that when this game matters most, nothing is guaranteed. And that's what makes this rivalry dangerous. Oregon versus Oregon State. The rivalry began in 1894 with a decisive Oregon win, launching what would become one of the West Coast's longest-running battles between the Oregon Ducks and the Oregon State Beavers. From the start, this wasn't about geography, it was about state pride and in-state respect. The Oregon Ducks and the Oregon State Beavers share the same borders, but they don't share the same reputation. Oregon grew into a flashy national brand. Speed, uniforms, attention. Oregon State grew up fighting for recognition, embracing the role of the in-state underdog. It is this imbalance that fuels up this matchup. When Oregon takes the field against Oregon State, the main goal is to avoid embarrassment. One loss to Oregon State can instantly sour an entire season, and that is exactly what happened in 2000. Oregon State stunned Oregon 23-13, a win that helped propel the Beavers to a historic season and a Fiesta Bowl victory. The upset changed how the program was viewed and remains one of the biggest wins in Beaver history. Oregon has shown dominance in this rivalry over the years, with dominating wins. They lead the series 70-49-10, but rivalry games don't care about history. Upsets happen, emotions spike, and the pressure feels heavier because everyone in the state is watching. Washington versus Washington State. The rivalry began in 1900 with a Washington win, launching what would become one of the West Coast's longest-running in-state feuds between the Washington Huskies and the Washington State Cougars. This matchup always splits the state of Washington in two. The Washington Huskies are the flagship program, big city influence, national expectations, and a history that demands relevance. The Washington State Cougars live on the other side of that identity, rural pride, toughness, and a fan base that spent decades thriving on being overlooked. That contrast is the Apple Cup. In 1984, Washington State defeated Washington 16-7, clinching a Rose Bowl berth and their first Apple Cup. It remains one of the greatest moments in Cougar football history, proof that the underdog could own the state on the biggest stage. They stepped up again big in 2012 by erasing a huge deficit to stun Washington 31-28 in overtime, snapping a long losing streak and delivering one of the most shocking finishes the rivalry has ever seen. For Washington State, beating Washington in this matchup is all about respect and proving that they matter just as much as the school across the state. Washington, on the other hand, simply can't lose this game. Rankings, injuries, or excuses don't change that. Washington has controlled the series over the years, holding a commanding edge at 77-34-6. But the Apple Cup has never cared much about history. UCLA versus USC. This UCLA versus USC rivalry isn't about state lines or traditions. It's about control of Los Angeles. The UCLA Bruins and the USC Trojans share the same city, recruit in the same territory, and the same spotlight. When they meet, it's never just a football game. It's a fight over relevance in one of the biggest markets in college sports. USC has long been the dominant brand. National championships, Heisman winners, decades of sustained success. While UCLA has lived on the other side of that story, the challenger, waiting for the moment to flip the balance and claim the city. Despite this, UCLA has had its fair share of success against USC. In 1939, UCLA shocked USC 7-0, earning its first ever win in the rivalry. It was the moment UCLA proved it wasn't just a secondary program, it belonged on the same field. In 1965, UCLA did it again by upsetting undefeated, number 1 ranked USC 20-16, costing the Trojans a national championship. For many Bruins fans, this remains the greatest win in rivalry history. As of recent seasons, USC has controlled the series, leading 52-34-7. And that record explains the pressure. USC football players view losing to UCLA as an embarrassment, a failure to protect the city. For UCLA, beating USC can define an entire season and instantly change how the program is viewed. Georgia Tech versus Georgia. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets and the Georgia Bulldogs represent two very different worlds inside the same state. Georgia Tech is built on academics, engineering, and innovation. Georgia is driven by football dominance, tradition, and SEC power. That contrast has fueled resentment for more than a century. Georgia's approach to this game is expectation. Winning is assumed. Losing is humiliating. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, this rivalry is all about disruption, the rare chance to embarrass the biggest football brand in the state. In 1999, Georgia Tech stunned Georgia 51-48 in Athens, one of the wildest shootouts the rivalry has ever seen. For Tech fans, it remains one of the sweetest road wins in program history. Another Tech shock happened in 2008. Georgia Tech beat Georgia 45-42 in Athens as a heavy underdog. The win ruined Georgia's season and reinforced Tech's reputation as the ultimate spoiler. Despite those upsets, Georgia has dominated this matchup, leading the all-time series 73-41-5. But the record doesn't erase the tension. Every Tech upset becomes legendary, and every Georgia win feels like order being restored. Virginia versus Virginia Tech. The first meeting between the Virginia Cavaliers and the Virginia Tech Hokies in 1895 laid the foundation for more than a century of in-state tension. Virginia and Virginia Tech represent two very different football cultures inside the same state. Virginia leans on tradition and academics. Virginia Tech built its program on toughness, grit, and a blue-collar edge. That contrast fuels everything. Virginia Tech views this rivalry as a symbol of dominance. For years, they controlled the series and turned this game into an annual reminder of who ran football in Virginia. But it wasn't like that in the beginning. In fact, Tech's dominance really started to show in the 1990s. In 1995, Virginia Tech defeated Virginia 40-38, snapping years of frustration and signaling a shift in the rivalry. This win marked the start of Tech's rise and the beginning of a new power balance in the state. In 2004, Virginia Tech capped off a win that made their streak a statement. They beat Virginia 16-10, extending what would become a 15-game winning streak in the series. By this point, the rivalry had turned one-sided, and the frustration on the Virginia side only grew deeper. In 2019, after 15 straight losses, Virginia finally broke through with a 39-30 win. The victory flipped years of frustration into celebration and sent Virginia to the ACC championship game, making it one of the most emotional moments in program history. Every time Virginia wins a game in this matchup, it feels like a breakthrough, proof they belong in the same conversation, on the same field. Virginia Tech owns the historical advantage over Virginia with a 52-37-1 series lead. But records don't soften the emotions. This game still defines seasons, it still shapes careers, and it still decides bragging rights across the state. Arizona versus Arizona State. The rivalry started when the Arizona Wildcats defeated the Arizona State Sun Devils, then Tempe Normal School, in 1899. More than a century later, it remains one of the longest-running rivalries in the sport. Arizona and Arizona State sit on opposite ends of the state and represent very different identities. Arizona leans tradition and academics. Arizona State embraces a louder, more rebellious image. That contrast turns every meeting into a fight for control of the desert. Wins by Arizona State in this matchup symbolizes dominance, reminding everyone who really owns the state. Wins for Arizona, on the other hand, is all about silencing their biggest rival and flipping the narrative in one night. And this was the case in 1970, when Arizona shocked Arizona State 20-7, handing the Sun Devils their only loss of the season and costing them a national championship opportunity. It remains one of the most painful losses in ASU history. Given how competitive both programs are, this series has stayed tight. As of the most recent seasons, Arizona holds a narrow edge at 52-46-1, close enough to make every kickoff feel dangerous. Kansas versus Kansas State. The first football meeting between the Kansas Jayhawks and the Kansas State Wildcats in 1902 set the foundation for what would become the Sunflower Showdown. From the start, it was about state pride and refusing to lose to a neighbor. Inside Kansas, this game matters more than any other. One result decides who truly owns the state. Kansas State built its football identity on toughness, stability, and consistency, especially from the 1990s onward. Year after year, they became the standard everyone else was measured against, with dominating wins against their neighbor. In 1998, Kansas State demolished Kansas 54-0 during a season that ended with a Big 12 championship appearance. The game symbolized how far the Wildcats had come and how wide the gap had grown. Kansas, meanwhile, has often struggled on the field, and that only intensifies the rivalry because every upset feels enormous. In 2018, Kansas snapped a long losing streak with a 24-21 win in Manhattan. The upset stunned the state and reminded everyone that no streak lasts forever in rivalry games. In this matchup, Kansas still holds the overall edge in the series, leading the series 64-54-5. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The modern balance of power is what fuels the tension. Kansas State views this rivalry as a way of protecting their territory and maintaining superiority. For Kansas, winning is all about pride, proof they can still stand toe-to-toe with their biggest rival, no matter the odds. Alabama Crimson Tide, 2008 to present. Alabama's modern dynasty begins with a program trying to remember who it was supposed to be. When Nick Saban arrived in 2007, Alabama still had its trophies, but not its authority. The program had talent, but no identity. Discipline wavered. Consistency was gone. Saban didn't promise instant championships. He promised control. By 2008, that control was already visible. Alabama was suffocating teams. The offense was conservative but precise. The defense overwhelmed opponents snap after snap. Alabama reached the SEC championship game and played Florida for a national title berth. They lost, but the loss didn't feel like a setback. It felt like a warning shot. The foundation was in place. The warning became reality in 2009. That season was built around imposing will. Mark Ingram carried the offense behind a dominant line, winning the program's first Heisman Trophy. Alabama beat Florida in the SEC championship game, then dismantled Texas for the national title. The message was simple. Alabama didn't need gimmicks. It would beat you physically and patiently. The next season tested whether this was sustainable or fleeting. In 2010, Alabama lost 3 regular season games and fell out of the title picture. For most programs, that would have signaled regression. Instead, Alabama treated it as refinement. Recruiting didn't slip. The standard didn't change. The machine stayed intact. By 2011, the defense reached something close to perfection. Alabama lost a tight regular season game to LSU, then got a second chance in the national championship. This time, Alabama erased LSU completely, winning 21-0 without allowing a touchdown. That team allowed fewer than 9 points per game all season. In 2012, Alabama confirmed it wasn't peaking. Behind a deeper roster and a more balanced offense, Alabama rolled through the schedule and defeated Notre Dame in the national championship. 3 titles in 4 years placed Saban into rare historical territory. Alabama was becoming a dynasty. Then came the moment that reminded everyone dominance doesn't remove chaos. In 2013, Alabama entered the Iron Bowl undefeated. A missed field goal returned for a touchdown ended the season instantly. The kick six became one of the most replayed moments in college football history. Alabama didn't collapse afterward. It recalibrated. The playoff era forced another evolution. In 2014, Alabama reached the first college football playoff, but was outpaced by Ohio State's speed and creativity. The lesson was clear. Physical dominance alone was no longer enough. That lesson shaped the next phase. In 2015, Alabama leaned into power one last time. Derrick Henry carried the offense relentlessly, winning the Heisman Trophy and dragging Alabama to another national title. It was a reminder that power still mattered, but it couldn't be the only answer anymore. By 2016, transition was underway. Jalen Hurts led Alabama with composure and athleticism, but the offense remained limited. Alabama reached the national championship again and lost to Clemson at the last moment. The dynasty was approaching a crossroads. That crossroads arrived in 2017. Trailing at halftime of the national championship, Saban made the defining decision of the dynasty. He benched Hurts and inserted true freshman Tua Tagovailoa. Tua threw the game-winning touchdown in overtime. That moment symbolized everything about Alabama's longevity. No attachment, no sentiment, only adaptation. From there, Alabama fully embraced transformation. In 2018, the offense became explosive. Tua, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and Devontae Smith overwhelmed defenses weekly. Alabama reached the championship again, only to be outplayed by Clemson. It was proof that the margin had narrowed. In 2019, injuries exposed vulnerability. Alabama missed the playoff for the first time. For the first time in a decade, the dynasty felt human. The response was immediate. In 2020, Alabama produced its most complete team ever. The offense shattered records. Devontae Smith became the first wide receiver to win the Heisman Trophy in nearly 30 years. Alabama went undefeated and dominated the playoff. That season felt like the culmination of every previous adaptation. Recent seasons have reflected a new reality. The transfer portal, NIL, and national parity have reshaped the sport. Alabama no longer towers over everyone weekly, but it remains present, competitive, and dangerous every year. The dynasty didn't collapse. It stabilized in a more crowded landscape. What defines Alabama's modern dynasty is not a single era or style. It survived by changing before it had to. It endured by replacing comfort with evolution. It lasted because dominance was treated as temporary unless constantly defended. That is why this dynasty outlived every prediction of its end. Oklahoma Sooners, 1948 to 1958. Oklahoma's dynasty did not begin with flash. It began with structure, repetition, and patience. When Bud Wilkinson took over in the mid-1940s, Oklahoma was not a national power. The program had talent, but it lacked a system that could sustain success year after year. Wilkinson changed that by building something college football had never really seen before, a program that won through precision and continuity rather than star power. By the late 1940s, the foundation was set. Oklahoma committed fully to the split-tee offense, a scheme that emphasized timing, discipline, and execution over improvisation. Every player knew his assignment. Every practice reinforced the same principles. The goal was not to surprise opponents. It was to out-execute them until resistance disappeared. That approach took hold quickly. In 1950, Oklahoma won its first national championship of the era. The team was balanced, efficient, and ruthless with mistakes. It did not rely on explosive plays. It relied on controlling the game snap by snap. From that point forward, Oklahoma stopped being a regional power and became the sport's measuring stick. What followed was a run that still feels unreal. Between 1948 and 1957, Oklahoma won 47 consecutive games, a streak that remains the longest in college football history. Entire recruiting classes came and went without experiencing a loss. Opponents did not enter games hoping to win. They hoped to survive. The championships followed naturally. Oklahoma claimed national titles in 1950, 1955, and 1956, and finished at or near the top of the polls almost every year in between. But the dynasty wasn't defined by trophies alone. Wilkinson's teams were mentally suffocating. They rarely committed penalties. They rarely turned the ball over. They forced opponents to beat themselves through impatience and errors. The longer games went on, the more Oklahoma tightened its grip. By the mid-1950s, the dynasty had matured into something almost institutional. The players rotated, but the product stayed the same. New starters stepped into roles already perfected by those before them. There was no adjustment period. The system absorbed them. The streak finally ended in 1957, not because Oklahoma collapsed, but because sustaining perfection forever is impossible. Even then, the dynasty didn't abruptly stop. Oklahoma remained elite, continued winning conference titles, and stayed nationally relevant long after the streak ended. What made this dynasty special was dominance through repetition. Oklahoma proved that college football could be mastered through organization and discipline at a level no one else had attempted. The Sooners didn't overwhelm teams physically. They overwhelmed them mentally. This dynasty laid the blueprint for modern programs. Control the system, control the details, control the game. And for nearly a decade, no one could stop it. Notre Dame Fighting Irish, 1941 to 1949. Notre Dame's dynasty of the 1940s was built on national reach and absolute authority. By the time the 1940s began, Notre Dame was already a powerhouse. What separated this era from everything before it was how completely the program dominated the sport during a period of national uncertainty. While World War II disrupted college football everywhere else, Notre Dame remained stable, disciplined, and elite. The dynasty was shaped by Frank Leahy. Leahy took over in 1941 and immediately imposed structure. His teams were physical, fast, and meticulously coached. Notre Dame didn't rely on gimmicks. It relied on precision. Blocking angles, tackling fundamentals, and situational awareness were drilled relentlessly. The result was consistency at a time when most programs struggled to field experienced rosters. The impact was immediate. From 1941 through 1949, Notre Dame went undefeated 6 times. During that span, the Irish won 4 national championships and lost just 2 games total. Opponents didn't measure success by wins. They measured it by competitiveness. Notre Dame's advantage extended beyond the field. The program recruited nationally when most teams recruited locally. Players from across the country wanted to wear the gold helmet. Notre Dame's schedule brought them into stadiums nationwide, making them college football's most visible brand. Every game felt like a national event. Signature teams defined the era. The 1943 team went undefeated and unscored upon in multiple games. The 1946 squad featured dominant line play and one of the most balanced rosters of the decade.
Each championship team looked slightly different, but the outcome stayed the same. What made this dynasty especially suffocating was its depth. While other programs rotated players out due to the war, Notre Dame maintained continuity. Coaching stability and player development allowed them to reload rather than rebuild. The system didn't bend when circumstances changed.
The run finally slowed near the end of the decade, not because the program declined, but because the rest of the sport began to modernize. Scholarships expanded, television exposure grew, parity slowly increased. Still, Notre Dame's 1940s dynasty set the standard for national dominance. It proved that a program could transcend region, circumstance, and era. Miami Hurricanes, 1983 to 1992. Miami's first great dynasty didn't grow quietly. It exploded. Before the early 1980s, Miami was an afterthought nationally. The program had moments, but no sustained identity. That changed when Howard Schnellenberger arrived and decided Miami would never try to out-tradition the sport's blue bloods. Instead, it would out-recruit them. Miami built its foundation on South Florida. The Hurricanes tapped into a talent pool that most programs ignored or underestimated. Speed, aggression, and confidence defined the roster. Miami didn't want to look like anyone else. It wanted to intimidate. The breakthrough came in 1983. Miami entered the season unranked and unafraid. Led by Bernie Kosar, the Hurricanes knocked off powerhouse after powerhouse before reaching the Orange Bowl against Nebraska. In a moment that defined the program's personality, Miami went for too late to secure the national championship instead of settling for a tie. They won, and college football took notice. That title changed everything. From that point forward, Miami wasn't chasing respect. It demanded it. The program embraced an edge that opponents hated and players fed off. Swagger became part of the uniform. As the decade progressed, Miami evolved but never softened. Under Jimmy Johnson, the Hurricanes became faster, deeper, and more ruthless. They overwhelmed teams with defensive speed and offensive explosiveness. The 1987 national championship team may have been the most physically intimidating college roster ever assembled. Even seasons without titles felt dominant. Miami consistently finished near the top of the polls, sent waves of players to the NFL, and turned big games into statements. Losses were rare. Blowouts were common. By the early 1990s, Dennis Erickson carried the dynasty forward. Miami won national championships in 1989 and 1991, proving the culture transcended coaching changes. The Hurricanes didn't just reload talent, they reloaded attitude. What separated this dynasty from others was its defiance. Miami thrived on being hated. Flags, trash talk, and celebrations became part of the spectacle. The program turned negativity into fuel, and opponents often unraveled emotionally before the fourth quarter. The run slowed in the early 1990s as sanctions, coaching turnover, and increased parity caught up. But by then, Miami had permanently altered the sport. This dynasty didn't just win championships, it changed how college football looked, felt, and sounded. Swagger became strategy, confidence became weaponized, and for nearly a decade, Miami made the rest of the country play on its terms. Florida State Seminoles, 1987 to 2000. Florida State's dynasty was not built on short bursts of dominance. It was built on relentless consistency. When Bobby Bowden arrived in Tallahassee in the mid-1970s, Florida State was not a national power. By the late 1980s, it became the most dependable program in college football. The Seminoles didn't just win. They showed up every single year with the same expectations and met them almost every time. The turning point came in 1987. That season marked the beginning of an unprecedented run. Florida State finished in the top 5 of the final polls and never left that territory for the next 14 seasons. No other program in the modern era has matched that level of sustained excellence. Early on, the Seminoles were known for speed and offense. Quarterbacks like Charlie Ward brought precision and poise. The offense was fast, aggressive, and confident. Florida State wasn't overpowering teams physically the way Alabama did later. It overwhelmed them with tempo, talent, and execution. The 1993 season became the defining breakthrough. Florida State won its first national championship after years of near misses. Charlie Ward won the Heisman Trophy, and the Seminoles finally pushed past the label of being great but unlucky. That title validated everything Bowden had built. What followed was not a drop-off, it was reinforcement. Throughout the 1990s, Florida State lived in the title conversation. They won the ACC almost every year, reached national championship games repeatedly, and sent elite talent to the NFL at every position. The roster pipeline never dried up. The program adapted as college football changed. As offenses became more explosive nationally, Florida State matched them. As defenses got faster, Florida State stayed ahead. Recruiting remained elite, player development remained steady, and the system never wavered. The 1999 season marked the peak. Florida State went undefeated and won the national championship behind a complete roster that reflected everything the dynasty stood for. Speed, discipline, and confidence were embedded in every position group. It was the most polished version of Bowden's vision. By 2000, the run reached its natural end. Florida State remained elite, but the margin had shrunk. Parity increased, and the sport began shifting toward a new era of specialization and recruiting battles. Still, the standard Florida State set had already been written into history. This dynasty was never about being unbeatable. It was about being unavoidable. For 14 straight seasons, Florida State forced its way into every national conversation. Win or lose, they were there. No rebuilds, no resets, just sustained pressure. That level of consistency is what makes this run one of the greatest dynasties college football has ever seen. Army Black Knights, 1944 to 1949. Army's dynasty was forged under circumstances no other program has ever faced. During World War II, college football was fragmented. Rosters were depleted, schedules were unstable, and many programs struggled just to field teams. Army did not struggle. It dominated. The reason was simple. West Point became the gathering point for the nation's best young athletes who were also training to serve. The result was overwhelming. From 1944 to 1949, Army became the most powerful force in college football. The Black Knights went undefeated in 1944, 1945, and 1946, winning national championships in each of those seasons. During that stretch, they did not just beat opponents, they dismantled them. The peak came immediately. The 1944 and 1945 teams were nearly untouchable. Army overwhelmed opponents with speed, discipline, and execution that felt professional compared to the rest of the country. Their offense moved with precision, their defense swarmed, and mistakes were rare. Games were often decided early. Individual stars elevated the dynasty. Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis, known as Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside, formed one of the most devastating backfields the sport has ever seen. They combined power and speed in a way defenses simply could not handle. Blanchard won the Heisman Trophy in 1945, and Davis followed in 1946. Few programs have ever produced back-to-back Heisman winners, let alone during an undefeated championship run. Army's dominance extended beyond wins. They became a national symbol during wartime. Games were widely followed, and victories carried emotional weight beyond football. Army represented discipline, unity, and national pride at a moment when the country needed it. As the war ended, the landscape shifted. By the late 1940s, service commitments shortened playing careers, recruiting advantages faded, and other programs stabilized. Army remained competitive, but the unique conditions that fueled its dominance no longer existed. The dynasty ended not because of failure, but because the world changed. Army's run stands alone in college football history. No program has ever dominated under such extraordinary circumstances, and none ever will again. Nebraska Cornhuskers, 1993 to 1997. Nebraska's dynasty of the 1990s was built on inevitability. By the early 1990s, Tom Osborne had already turned Nebraska into a consistent power, but something was missing. The program kept reaching the top and falling just short. Close losses in championship moments defined the frustration. What followed was not a rebuild, but a breakthrough that unlocked one of the most dominant runs the sport has ever seen. That breakthrough arrived in 1993. Nebraska came within seconds of a national championship, losing a last-second game that hardened the program's edge. Instead of breaking confidence, the loss sharpened it. The roster was loaded with veterans, the system was perfected, and the hunger was obvious. From that point forward, Nebraska stopped letting games hang in the balance. The offense was built around the option, but it was unlike anything else in the country. Nebraska rotated linemen relentlessly, wore defenses down, and dominated fourth quarters. Opponents might survive early, they rarely survived late. The titles followed quickly. Nebraska won the national championship in 1994, validating years of near misses. In 1995, the dynasty reached its peak. That team went undefeated, won every game by at least 2 touchdowns, and is often considered the greatest college football team ever assembled. They didn't just beat opponents, they overwhelmed them. The dominance continued in 1996 and 1997. Even as personnel changed, the results stayed the same. Nebraska won another national championship in 1997, completing a run of 3 titles in 4 seasons. The roster pipeline never slowed. Speed, strength, and discipline remained constant. What separated Nebraska from everyone else was preparation. The program treated conditioning as a weapon. By the second half, opponents were exhausted. Nebraska was not. The system demanded physical sacrifice, and it rewarded endurance. The dynasty ended as the sport changed. Scholarship limits tightened. The option became harder to sustain nationally. Recruiting pipelines shifted. Tom Osborne retired after the 1997 championship, stepping away at the absolute peak. Nebraska never collapsed, but it never replicated this level again. This dynasty was about dominance through repetition, conditioning, and control. Nebraska turned physical football into an endurance test, and for 5 seasons, no one could pass it. Alabama Crimson Tide, 1961 to 1966. Alabama's first true dynasty was forged through discipline, identity, and restoration. When Bear Bryant arrived in Tuscaloosa in 1958, Alabama football was broken. The program had slipped badly, facilities were outdated, and player buy-in was fractured. Bryant's early seasons were brutal by design. He ran off players who weren't committed and rebuilt the roster around toughness and accountability. By the early 1960s, the transformation was complete. The breakthrough came in 1961. Alabama went undefeated and won the national championship, announcing itself as the sport's new standard. Bryant's teams were not flashy. They were controlled, physical, and fundamentally sound. Defense was the centerpiece, and mistakes were treated as fatal errors. The dominance continued immediately. The roster was deep, disciplined, and mentally tougher than its opponents. Alabama didn't overwhelm teams with speed. It broke them with precision. The 1964 and 1965 seasons extended the dynasty. Alabama won 2 more national championships, giving Bryant 3 titles in 5 seasons. These teams thrived on balance. The offense was efficient, the defense relentless, and special teams flawless. Alabama rarely beat itself, forcing opponents to play perfect football just to stay close. What made this run special was consistency. Year after year, Alabama looked the same. New starters stepped into roles that already existed. The expectations never changed. The standard never dipped. Players knew exactly what was required before they ever took the field. The 1966 season marked the end of the run. Alabama finished undefeated again, but tied in the Sugar Bowl, creating controversy over national title recognition. It was a fitting conclusion to a dynasty defined by control rather than spectacle. Even when challenged, Alabama refused to collapse. This era established Alabama's blueprint. Bryant proved that dominance could be manufactured through discipline and structure rather than innovation alone. The program didn't chase trends. It set expectations. Everything Alabama would become later traces back to this stretch. USC Trojans, 2002 to 2008. USC's dynasty was built on inevitability, star power, and total control of the sport's biggest stage. When Pete Carroll took over in 2001, USC was talented but unfocused. The program had underachieved for years despite recruiting advantages and national visibility. Carroll didn't overhaul everything. He simplified it. His philosophy centered on competition, confidence, and speed. USC didn't try to out-scheme opponents. It tried to overwhelm them. By 2002, the shift was already visible. USC went from inconsistent to commanding almost overnight. The defense swarmed. The offense played fast and fearless, and the roster began stacking elite talent year after year. The Trojans finished strong and entered the national conversation again. The dynasty truly ignited in 2003. USC dominated the season and finished ranked #1 in the AP poll, claiming a national championship despite the split title controversy. Regardless of official recognition, the message was clear. USC was the best team in the country. From there, the run escalated into complete control. In 2004, USC produced one of the most dominant teams in college football history. Led by Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, and a loaded defense, the Trojans went undefeated and crushed Oklahoma in the national championship game. They weren't just winning, they were dismantling elite programs with ease. The following seasons reinforced the dynasty's grip. USC won 34 consecutive games, a streak that spanned multiple seasons and included victories over top-ranked opponents in every major environment. The Coliseum became the sport's most intimidating venue. USC didn't just protect home field, it owned it. The style was as important as the results. USC played with confidence that bordered on arrogance, and opponents felt it. Recruits gravitated toward the program. Hollywood visibility, NFL development, and national dominance combined into a perfect storm. USC was setting cultural trends. The first crack came in 2005. USC reached the national championship undefeated again, but fell in an instant classic against Texas. The loss didn't erase the dynasty, but it exposed how narrow the margins had become. In 2006 and 2007, USC remained elite, but no longer untouchable. Injuries, quarterback turnover, and rising parity chipped away at the edge. The Trojans were still winning conference titles, still producing NFL stars, but the sense of inevitability began to fade. By 2008, the dynasty had reached its conclusion. USC was still powerful, still relevant, but the sport had changed. Scholarship limits tightened, competition widened, and the gap USC once exploited narrowed. The program remained a heavyweight, but the stranglehold was gone. What defined USC's dynasty was not just championships, it was presence. It was star power. It was control of the sport's biggest moments. For nearly a decade, college football revolved around USC. If you wanted the throne, you had to go through Los Angeles. Miami Hurricanes, 2000 to 2003. Miami's second dynasty was not built over time. It detonated all at once. At the end of the 1990s, Miami football was barely holding itself together. NCAA sanctions had stripped scholarships, depth was thin, and the program was fighting to stay relevant. But beneath the surface, elite talent was quietly stacking. Players recruited during the down years were maturing together, and what followed was one of the most talent-dense stretches college football has ever seen. The explosion came in 2000. Miami finished the regular season undefeated and reached the Sugar Bowl, only to lose a controversial national championship game to Florida State. That loss became fuel. It hardened the roster and unified a locker room that already believed it was better than everyone else. That belief became reality in 2001. The 2001 Hurricanes are widely considered the greatest team in college football history. The roster was absurd. Future NFL stars filled every position group. The defense was violent, fast, and interchangeable. The offense was balanced and explosive. Miami didn't just beat teams, it embarrassed elite programs. That season ended with the dismantling of Nebraska in the Rose Bowl for the national championship. The game was over early. The message was unmistakable. No one was close. What made this dynasty different was depth. Miami rotated future NFL starters freely. If one player went down, another equally dangerous replacement stepped in. Practices were more competitive than games. The internal competition sharpened everything. The dominance carried into 2002. Miami entered the season riding a massive winning streak and returned to the national championship game again. They were seconds away from repeating as champions before a late pass interference call extended the game for Ohio State. Miami eventually lost in double overtime, snapping the aura of invincibility, but not the dynasty itself. By 2003, the final chapter unfolded. Miami remained loaded and dangerous, but the edge had dulled slightly. Coaching changes, early departures to the NFL, and the weight of expectations began to take their toll. The Hurricanes finished the season at number 5, but did not claim another title. And just like that, it was over. The roster was picked clean by the NFL. Depth evaporated. Sanctions still lingered. The dynasty had burned too bright and too fast to sustain itself longer. What defines this run is not longevity, it is concentration. Never before had so much elite talent existed in one place at the same time. Miami's swagger wasn't manufactured. Opponents felt it during warm-ups. Games were often decided by halftime. This dynasty didn't reshape strategy or systems. It reshaped intimidation. For a brief window, Miami wasn't chasing anyone. It stood alone, daring the rest of college football to survive 4 quarters. No one did.
Xavier Worthy, Texas. From the moment he arrived in Austin, his speed was different. Defenses played off coverage, safeties shaded deep, and it still didn't matter. Worthy's first step forced coordinators to rewrite game plans. In 3 seasons, he totaled over 2,700 receiving yards and 26 touchdowns, much of it built on raw acceleration. And when he hit the NFL Combine in 2024, his legend turned official. His 4.21-second 40-yard dash became the fastest electronically timed run ever recorded. But for anyone who watched him at Texas, it didn't come as a surprise, because on Saturdays, everyone already knew Xavier Worthy was the fastest player in college football. John Ross, Washington. He was the Huskies' ultimate weapon, a receiver who could score from anywhere on the field. In 2016, he caught 81 passes for 1,150 yards and 17 touchdowns, helping Washington reach the college football playoff. Every play was a threat to go the distance. Bubble screens became breakaways. Deep posts turned into sprints that no corner could survive. Ross's acceleration was so sudden that defensive backs had to backpedal before the snap. And even then, they still got burned. What made him special was his control at full speed. He could stop, cut, and explode again without losing balance. On a roster loaded with future pros, Ross was the one defenders feared most. When he ran a 4.22 second 40 at the NFL Combine, it only confirmed what college fans already knew. He was the fastest player in the country. Chris Johnson, East Carolina. Before the NFL nicknamed him CJ 2000, Chris Johnson was already leaving defenders behind at East Carolina. He arrived as a little-known recruit, but turned into the fastest player the program had ever seen. Johnson's acceleration was unreal. One cut, and he was gone. In 2007, he recorded over 2,960 all-purpose yards, the most in the nation. He scored 24 total touchdowns, lining up at running back, receiver, and returner. Defenses couldn't scheme for him. Even when they had the angle, he took it away with speed. Track numbers backed it up. Johnson ran a 10.38-second 100-meter dash in college, and later a 4.24-second 40 at the NFL Combine, one of the fastest ever recorded. Henry Ruggs III, Alabama. At Alabama, Henry Ruggs III made defensive backs rethink what speed meant. Every time he lined up, safeties backed off. Corners gave cushion and still lost the race. Playing in a stacked Crimson Tide receiving corps alongside Jerry Jeudy, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle, Ruggs didn't need volume to stand out. His speed did all the talking. He averaged more than 17 yards per catch over his career, and scored a touchdown once every 4 receptions. Most of them came on plays that looked routine until Ruggs shifted gears and turned space into daylight. In high school, he ran a 10.58 in the 100-meter dash, an Alabama state record, and his 4.2 7-second 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine later confirmed what everyone already saw on tape. Ruggs wasn't a route technician or a possession receiver. He was the spark that broke games open. One missed angle, and he was gone. During his 3 years in Tuscaloosa, no one on the field moved faster, and few in college football history have moved quite like him.
Tariq Woolen.
UTSA. At UTSA, Tariq Woolen was the kind of athlete who didn't look real on the field. He arrived on campus as a wide receiver, standing 6'4" with sprinter's speed. But when the coaching staff moved him to cornerback before his junior year, everything clicked. Suddenly, the fastest player on the roster was playing defense, and quarterbacks learned to stay away from his side. Woolen's size-speed combination was unheard of. He could press receivers at the line, flip his hips, and still close a 10-yard gap in seconds. His long stride covered ground faster than most receivers could run routes. By his senior year, he'd become one of the most feared corners in Conference USA. Then came the 2022 NFL Combine. Woolen ran a 4.2 6-second 40-yard dash, the fastest ever by a player over 6 feet 4 inches. Scouts were stunned. For a corner that size to move like that didn't make sense. Dante Stallworth, Tennessee. At Tennessee, Dante Stallworth looked like a track star disguised as a wide receiver. He was explosive off the line, smooth through his routes, and once the ball was in his hands, the race was already over. Stallworth ran past SEC defenders like they were standing still, and his deep speed gave the Vols one of the most dangerous vertical threats in the country. In his final season, he averaged nearly 19 yards per catch and scored 10 touchdowns, helping Tennessee finish 11-2. His stride was effortless, long, controlled, and faster than anyone expected from a 6-foot-tall receiver. At his pro day in 2002, Stallworth reportedly ran a 4.22 in the 40-yard dash, times that would have rivaled the fastest ever recorded. Even if those numbers were hand-timed, the film backed it up. No one in the SEC could stay with him in open space. His speed wasn't hype or myth. It was real, and it showed every Saturday.
Dree Archer.
Kent State. At Kent State, Dree Archer turned the MAC into a highlight reel. Listed at 5'8" and 173 pounds, Archer used his size to his advantage. Low to the ground, instant acceleration, impossible to square up. Every touch looked like a race that no one else entered. In 2012, he put together one of the most efficient seasons in college football history. He rushed for 1,429 yards, caught passes for another 561, and scored 24 total touchdowns on just 198 touches. He averaged more than 9 yards per play, turning simple handoffs and swing passes into breakaway runs that left defenders chasing shadows. Track speed backed it up. At the 2014 NFL Combine, Archer ran a 4.26-second 40-yard dash, one of the fastest ever recorded. But long before that stopwatch, everyone in the MAC already knew. If Archer got into open space, the play was over. He didn't need volume or a big program to prove it. Dree Archer's speed was game-changing every time he touched the ball. Marquise Goodwin, Texas. At Texas, Marquise Goodwin was the rare athlete who could have been a full-time Olympian or a full-time game breaker, and he somehow managed to be both. He was a world-class sprinter and long jumper who represented Team USA at the 2012 London Olympics. On the football field, that same explosive power translated into instant separation. Lining up as a wide receiver and returner, he made the field feel small. In his 4 seasons with the Longhorns, he scored in every possible way: deep routes, reverses, kick returns. The moment the ball touched his hands, he hit another gear. Defensive backs gave him space, and it still wasn't enough. Goodwin's ability to accelerate through angles made him a constant threat, even in an offense that never fully showcased his potential. When he ran a 4.27-second 40-yard dash at the 2013 NFL Combine, it simply confirmed what everyone in Austin had seen for years: elite, Olympic-level speed that no college defender could match. DeMarcus Van Dyke, Miami. At Miami, DeMarcus Van Dyke's speed was the first thing everyone noticed, and the last thing opponents ever caught. Standing 6'1" with long strides and sprinter form, Van Dyke played cornerback like he was built for the 100-meter dash. He could press at the line and still recover from any mistake in an instant. During his time with the Hurricanes, he played in 51 games and became known for his ability to close space on deep routes. Quarterbacks quickly learned to avoid testing him on go balls. Even when he was beat by a step, his speed gave him another chance. At the 2011 NFL Combine, Van Dyke ran a 4.28-second 40-yard dash, one of the fastest ever by a defensive back. Jacoby Ford, Clemson. At Clemson, Jacoby Ford was a human highlight waiting to happen. He came to campus as both a football recruit and a track star, and he excelled at both. Ford won multiple ACC sprint titles, including the 60-meter indoor and 100-meter outdoor championships, posting times that rivaled professional sprinters. On the football field, that same burst made him one of the most dangerous all-purpose players in the country. As a receiver, Ford's speed turned short routes into touchdowns. On special teams, he flipped field position every time he touched the ball. Defenders gave him 10 yards of cushion, and it still wasn't enough. In 2009, his senior season, he racked up 1,389 all-purpose yards and 10 total touchdowns, becoming one of the most explosive players in Clemson history. At the 2010 NFL Combine, he ran a 4.28-second 40-yard dash. J.J. Nelson, UAB. At UAB, J.J. Nelson turned every kickoff and deep route into a track meet. He arrived as a lightly recruited receiver from Alabama, but immediately stood out for one reason: pure speed. Nelson's stride was electric. Once he hit top gear, defenders looked frozen. He was a deep ball specialist who didn't need trick plays or motion to get open. He simply outran everyone in front of him. By his senior year, he was the Blazers' most dangerous weapon. In 2014, he led the nation in kickoff return average at 38.3 yards per return, returning 4 kickoffs for touchdowns, one of the highest totals in the nation that season. Then came the 2015 NFL Combine, where Nelson officially clocked a 4.28-second 40-yard dash. Zedrick Woods, Ole Miss. Playing safety in the SEC means dealing with elite speed every week. But for 4 seasons, Woods was usually the fastest player on the field, no matter who lined up across from him. His range was what set him apart. He could play deep, diagnose the play, and close 10 yards before the receiver even turned around. Across 48 games, Woods built a reputation for reliability and closing speed. He finished his career with over 200 tackles, 6 interceptions, and 2 defensive touchdowns. His sideline-to-sideline burst allowed Ole Miss to disguise coverages and trust him as their last line of defense. Then came the 2019 NFL Combine, where Woods ran a 4.29-second 40-yard dash, the fastest time of any defensive back that year. For a safety, it was unheard of. Anthony Schwartz. At Auburn, Anthony Schwartz was nicknamed Flash, and it was an exaggeration. He arrived on campus already known as one of the fastest high school sprinters in the world, having run a 10.09-second 100 meters, an international level time that could qualify for Olympic trials. On the football field, that track speed translated instantly. As a freshman, Schwartz scored touchdowns 3 different ways: as a receiver, runner, and returner. Auburn used him in motion, on jet sweeps, and deep routes that forced cornerbacks into panic mode. His acceleration was instant. Even SEC defenders with perfect angles got burned. Over 3 seasons, he totaled nearly 1,750 yards from scrimmage and 12 touchdowns, despite splitting time in an offense that rotated skill players heavily. At his 2021 Pro Day, Schwartz ran a 4.26-second 40-yard dash, unofficially one of the fastest times ever recorded by a college player. DJ Turner, Michigan. At Michigan, DJ Turner was proof that raw speed and sharp instincts could make a cornerback nearly untouchable. He wasn't the biggest player on the field, standing 5'11" and just under 180 pounds. But his closing burst made him one of the most feared defensive backs in the Big Ten. Turner could mirror receivers stride for stride, recover from any mistake, and close space so fast that quarterbacks often gave up throwing to his side. Over his final 2 seasons, Turner became the anchor of a Michigan defense that dominated the conference. He logged 3 interceptions, 20 pass breakups, and played a major role in back-to-back college football playoff appearances. What separated him was his transition speed, the way he could plant, flip his hips, and explode out of a break without hesitation. It showed up in every game, and it showed up even louder at the 2023 NFL Combine, where Turner ran a 4.26-second 40-yard dash, the fastest of any player that year. Michael Vick, Virginia Tech. At Virginia Tech, Michael Vick was speed and chaos rolled into one. He was the most electrifying athlete on any field he stepped on. Defenses couldn't prepare for him. In his first season as a starter, Vick led Virginia Tech to an 11-0 regular season and a spot in the BCS National Championship game. He threw for 2,065 yards, ran for another 682, and scored 21 total touchdowns. But stats couldn't capture what made him special. It was the moments, the escapes, the cutbacks, the plays that looked broken until he turned them into highlights. Vick's speed was track caliber. He reportedly ran a 4.33-second 40-yard dash, faster than most wide receivers of his era. Tyquan Thornton, Baylor. At Baylor, Tyquan Thornton was the definition of a vertical threat. He was long, lean, and built like a sprinter, and every defensive coordinator in the Big 12 knew exactly what was coming. They just couldn't stop it. At 6'2", Thornton's stride looked effortless, but in a few steps, he was 5 yards ahead. His speed forced safeties to play deep and opened the field for everyone else in the offense. In 2021, he broke out with 948 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, leading Baylor's offense as they captured the Big 12 championship. His deep ball chemistry with quarterback Jerry Bohannon turned routine plays into explosive highlights. Thornton's routes weren't complicated. His speed made them impossible to defend. At the 2022 NFL Combine, he stunned scouts with an unofficial 4.21-second 40-yard dash, which was later adjusted to 4.28. Still one of the fastest times ever recorded. Reggie Bush, USC. At USC, Reggie Bush made college football look like a video game on fast forward. Every cut, every bounce to the outside, every punt return looked like it was happening at a different speed than everyone else on the field. Bush had world-class acceleration, track-level agility, and the ability to change direction without slowing down. In 2005, he rushed for 1,740 yards, caught passes for another 478, and scored 18 touchdowns while averaging nearly 9 yards every time he touched the ball. USC used Bush everywhere. Running back, slot, return man, decoy. His speed warped defenses, opening space for everyone else. And in that era of dominant Trojans teams, he was the player that made the whole offense terrifying. At his 2006 Pro Day, Bush ran between 4.33 and 4.38 seconds in the 40-yard dash.
Deion Sanders.
Florida State, 1985 to 1988. He was the ultimate showman in an era that was still figuring out how to handle athletes like him. Every time he touched the ball, you could feel the stadium hold its breath. Whether it was a punt return, an interception, or a broken play, Sanders could turn it into a foot race that no one else could win. As a cornerback, he was unmatched. Quarterbacks learned quickly that throwing to his side was a mistake. On special teams, he was even more dangerous. He scored 6 return touchdowns in his college career, and every one of them looked like something drawn up for a video game. Sanders' track times backed up what the film showed. He ran a 4.27-second 40-yard dash by hand timing, and he was a multi-event track athlete for the Seminoles, competing in the 100 meters, 200 meters, and relays. That combination of speed and confidence made him feel untouchable. Bob Hayes, Florida A&M. Before there were stopwatches at the combine or radar guns on sprinters, there was Bob Hayes, the man who turned track speed into football dominance. At Florida A&M, Hayes was simply faster than everyone alive. He was a world-class sprinter who also starred as a receiver and returner, and his presence on the field changed how defenses played. Even in an era without precise timing, coaches and players said the same thing. If Hayes got a step, the play was over. He won 2 Olympic gold medals in 1964, one in the 100 meters and one in the 4x100 relay, where his anchor leg is still considered one of the fastest in history. That same year, he was averaging nearly 22 yards per catch at Florida A. NML opponents tried to jam him, double team him, even trip him, and nothing worked. Hayes' 100-meter best of 10.06 seconds translates to an estimated 4.19-second 40-yard dash, faster than anything officially recorded even today. Bo Jackson, Auburn. At Auburn, Bo Jackson was a different breed of athlete, a rare combination of power, agility, and speed that college football had never seen before. Listed at 6'1" and 230 pounds, Bo ran like a sprinter trapped in a fullback's body. Defenders expected contact. Instead, they got outrun. When he bounced outside, linebackers had no chance of catching him. In 4 seasons at Auburn, he rushed for over 4,300 yards and scored 45 touchdowns, winning the Heisman Trophy in 1985. Bo's burst was surreal for his size. Coaches and teammates told stories of him clocking 4.12 to 4.13 seconds in the 40-yard dash, hand-timed at Auburn's Pro Day. Numbers that sound mythical, but fit what everyone saw on film. He didn't need a stopwatch to prove it. The sight of defensive backs taking perfect angles and still losing the chase said everything. His speed turned every carry into a potential breakaway. One stride, and the defense was gone. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.